off the. Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another. They never thought it was possible. Three Wonks podcast, episode 9. We're almost on 10 episodes, people. I mean, I feel like 10. Episode 10. We haven't even thought about it. Maybe we should do something. I don't know if you guys have special ideas for episode 10. I feel like possibly there's something there, but we can do anything we want. But thanks for tuning in, guys. As you guys know, Three Wonks is a primarily focused. No, wait. Well, I'm not primarily focused. I'm tripping over my words here. Three Wonks is a primarily policy-focused podcast with three policy wonks featuring socialism done left, the socialist new liberal Micah Irfan, and myself, social democrat Econoboy. We would like to thank all of our patrons who support a policy-dense show in a polarized and sensationalist media landscape. If you would like to become a patron, support our show over at patreon.com/3wonks and become a member for as little as $3 a month. Get some cool benefits, support us, good idea. Today, we're talking about our ideologies. We'll take and discuss the 8 values political tests. We discuss which test would be the best. I mean, they all have their trade-offs, but we went with 8 values for, various subjective reasons. We'll take it individually, sort of person by person, and then we'll also aggregate our answers to determine the sort of blended ideology of the podcast. Typically, we represent this podcast as sort of a, representation of the left spectrum, right, from, more moderate, liberal leftists like Mike all the way to radical Stalinists like SDL. And so, the whole spectrum of the left, and then I'm the centrist on the podcast, the social democrat, but we'll see how much that holds
Half
true.
Stalin, right?
Exactly. Only 50% of the way there to Stalinism.
0% Stalin for me.
50%
Yeah.
Stalin, 50% Pinochet, the ideal politician.
Micah is clean of his Stalinist influences. After that, we'll actually get to our audience topic, which is more policy, sort of hard policy focus, which is, quote, what is the single worst non-housing regulation? So obviously we thought, look, it'd be too easy for all of us just to say zoning is bad, get rid of zoning nationwide. And I don't know if we'd all say that, but I feel like typically in sort of policy wonk spaces, in terms of bad regulations, we always hear about housing regulations. And so I figured, what's the worst regulation that doesn't involve housing? And so we'll talk about that later on in the show, but that'll be a really good discussion. We've each picked our worst non-housing economic regulation, and our worst, as you could say, maybe non-housing, maybe social regulations. So economic regulations and then non-economic regulations. So how's you guys' week spent? How's it been since the last 2 weeks that we've talked, guys? Are you thriving?
I'm thriving. I am surviving. Micah is slowly nodding his head.
It's finals week next week and the week following that, so I'm doing all I can.
Looks like you're really growing your hair
pretty
out, Micah. I mentioned STL's combed his hair this week, and Micah has really grown his hair out, it looks like.
Returning to my old hairstyle,
Beautiful. Well, we all revert at some point. I've had the same. When I eventually do my face reveal, one thing that will be funny to imagine is my adult face, but with the same hairstyle since literally the 4th grade. So I've had the same fundamental hairstyle for literally 15 years at this point.
We will post the 4th grade photos at 100,000 subscribers.
There we go. It would be reasonable to do. Anyway.
I choose to believe that it's like Samson for Micah. The hair grows longer, right? And he goes back into the Stalin phase. We're going to start getting some apology.
Imagine somewhere in between you and Micah. That's basically where my hair style looks like.
A moderate in literally everything. When I get my hair cut,
every respect.
See, this is the problem. When I get my hair cut, you're going to have to cut yours too, right? I'm going to be 1 inch, and you're going to have to be like 2 inches. This is
just find the mean, and that's the hair. That's the hair length he chooses.
Middle length hair gang, guys. It looks like we're all a part of it. We support our modern woke hairdos, of course. No buzz cuts in this podcast. Someone asks, is Micah a tiny little undergrad? That was a question, Micah. Are you a tiny little undergrad? The answer is yes. Micah is an undergrad, so it's a beautiful thing. Starting his educational journey the last couple of years, he learned a lot. When he started college, he was a socialist, and now he's some sort of right-wing liberal. So maybe there's some, lesson to be learned there. I'm not sure. But
Sounds like college indoctrinated him. I'm not sure I would
Don't
trust those
study
professors.
economics, kids. Don't study
There we go.
economics. You'll move to the center.
well, all right, guys, let's get started on the 8 values political test. So obviously, for those that don't know, the 8 values political test is a political ideology test. I mean, there's many political ideology tests. You know, hey, take this test and you'll find out something about yourself, kind of thing. And they ask you questions like this. You know, oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. We'll try to move somewhat quickly. I mean, we can't really, we can't have a 10-minute discussion on each of these questions. We'd just be here for too long. But I'm sure some questions will create more discussion than others. And I'll be taking my own sort of individual test alongside, and this is going to be the aggregated test of like the averaging out of all of our answers. But all these questions are just basic philosophical sort of overview primers, and it sort of aggregates them into some sort of ideology. STL, you raised your finger.
Oh, I was just going to
insinuating you wanted to say something.
Yes, I was going to say we should probably all take it independently, right? So we have each of our 3 results, and then you've got the aggregate one.
Yeah, so I did say several times, if you were paying attention, STL, that we would do that. But I'm used to, it's a typical socialist not paying attention to anything going on around him. It's fine. It's just a normal part of our day-to-day
And typical
experience.
liberal, I submitted mine like 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God. I didn't want to watch it, but I didn't want to do it ahead of time because I felt
we shouldn't do it ahead of time because, well, at the very least, you can take it like in real time now, just because we're going to go question by question and answer, answer all these questions presumably. But let me pull up the 8 values test. Okay, so I've got both of my 8 values tests up. So I'm the only one who's going to be sort of taking 2 of them at once. But I'll take the 8 values test and I'll take the aggregated test ourselves. That should be a fun, I don't know, a fun exercise, I assume. So anyway, let's do it, guys. Let's take this test. We can start from question 1 and just go from there. So the first question, a classic question. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. How do we feel about this one? At this point, I'm kind of on it depends on where you live, I guess, right? I mean, if you lived in North Korea, presumably your government would be more oppressive than any corporation in North Korea. In America, I don't know. I guess neutral. Like it's probably both of them.
I feel like there's like basically no country in which the government is not more of a potential threat. I mean, like governments kill people. Even in the United States, the government imprisons people that are innocent, and it treats them very poorly. Right? So. Amazon might be mean or something, but like I just don't see any context in which the government's not more of a risk than corporations.
So I don't like this question because if you take it in the theoretical one, like, hey, is it possible that mega corporations or whatever could be more oppressive than like current democratic governments? The answer is probably yes, because they're sort of like unelected pseudo governments. But like, in the status quo, are there any corporations that are doing like more evil things that a government has the potential to do? Like, I don't know. It just feels like a nonsense
I like
question.
to think about it, like, in our society, I suppose we could say in America, is oppression by corporations as an aggregate more of a concern than oppression by the government? I'd say no, I'm more concerned about oppression by government. It's more concerning.
Yeah, which one is more concerning? I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, because when you think about it, corporations are ultimately governed, obviously, just by the rules that are set forth by the government, right? So, I mean, if to the extent that a corporation's oppressive, well, then the government can seemingly just solve that problem, right? We can break up big corporations and regulate them, right? So
the reason I mention it is like, I don't know, think of like company towns or something. It's not impossible to imagine that in like a libertarian hellscape future that they would be like pseudo governments and worse. So I don't know. I do feel like if you take the question as it is, you're more concerned. You should right now be more concerned about oppression by like authoritarian governments.
Look, as a good anarchist, I am concerned with any oppression from any hierarchical authority. That is why I am a neutral. We should just be concerned about any oppression that exists.
We should definitely be like, I mean, right now, the government has the ability to use force, right? Like, I think even in the situation you're talking about, STL, where it's like, we live in the libertarian hellscape, so now we have company towns, and like, it could be anarcho-capitalism, right? That's just like feudalism in my mind. I think the corporations would literally become de facto governments, like by definition.
Yeah. So
all right,
part of the
last word, SDL. We do have to answer this question. We got to move on.
that actually is sort of my argument. Is part of the difficulty is that corporations are pseudo governments, even in our society. They're just like, they're governments of your time, partially with limits during the day. They have some political control within our government. Like I don't know.
I'm going
to
neutral.
agree just because I know what they're asking. I think I know what they're trying to get at in this question. But
SDL's an agree. I'm a neutral.
Strongly agree.
You wouldn't be a strongly agree, right? Because
strongly
it's
disagree.
Strongly disagree.
Oh yeah, strongly disagree. Oh yeah.
There we go. So as we've sort of star voted, I'll call that a soft
Neutral.
disagree for the podcast, since Micah feels so strongly on it.
All
right.
It's about to be so cringe.
Is it necessary? It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Strongly agree. Come on, let's sweep this one, guys. We all have to be strongly agree on this one.
Obvious strongly agree.
Okay,
we only got an agree from Micah.
Micah is a shill neoliberal, so he's a soft agree. Since it's 2 strong agrees, 1 soft agree, I'll go strong agree for the podcast. Next one, the freer the markets, the freer the people. This will be a good one. Micah's a soft agree. SDL, what do you think?
Disagree.
A disagree. Interesting.
Well, in general, more liberal markets mean more economic freedom, control over your own decision making. I mean, it seems like even countries like Denmark and the kind of countries that you guys would say.
But Micah,
are more
you
on the left side.
just said government intervention is required in markets. What do you mean by free market?
Yeah, so I think in general,
it's a genuine question, right? It seems like a contradiction.
I would say that there's a reason why it's a soft agree, right? So you could there's an unlimited list of government interventions you can make. And I'd say on average, if you randomly selected one of those interventions, that would make people less free, right? So there can be some government interventions that I support that make people that make people more free in maybe some respect. But in general, on average, the impact on freedom is negative, right? Out of all of the interventions they can make, or maybe out of the selection sample of interventions that governments actually do make.
I don't know. I feel like that's sort of like saying, like, for instance, like I would agree that for instance, taxes should be as low as possible. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we only tax 1% of like total GDP or something, right? No, I mean, the lowest possible sort of utilitarian maximizing amount of taxes might be 35% of GDP, right? And so similarly, in my view, the way I look at this question is, markets are actually extraordinarily the case. Like, markets shouldn't be totally free, because a totally free market would be, deleterious, let's say, to so many aspects of our lives. And so I'm not sure principally it should be the case that we would say, if the market's freer, people are freer, right?
I think generally it's the case that, like, whenever we think about freedom in markets, we're talking largely about regulations and maybe potentially like targeted taxes and subsidies, which could like obfuscate market conditions. I don't think general taxation or general like subsidies, like personal subsidy.
Well, no, I just use taxes as an example, but like we can say the same thing about economic regulation, is to say that, yeah, I agree, we should have the least amount of regulations possible, but it might just turn out that the least amount of regulations possible is still a lot of regulation, right? So
I don't know what you mean by possible, but I would just say that the freest countries in the world are ones with relatively liberal markets. And it seems like
like Sweden, the most democratic country in the world. I don't know. So what I would point to here is sort of two dimensions. One thing I would introduce is the idea of, we've been focused on negative freedom. It might be in what we label it, like freedom to act without the state preventing you from buying something. But an important consideration is positive freedom. So like G.A. Cohen raises this idea: you are free nominally to travel between any city in the country in the United States. But if you are desperately poor, you are not actually free to do so. Sure. And so I think there's a real degree to which sometimes markets limit positive freedom. And so that's the argument for stuff like, in Micah's worldview, subsidies, and my worldview, subsidies plus stuff, say, like single payer healthcare. That there are just certain things that make everyone freer. If you are dead, no freedom. So good to keep people alive. It's like pro freedom to eliminate or severely restrict the healthcare market in that sense.
This is just a question of on balance, right? Like, what is the average impact of interventions? And like, I suppose, like, I think that as we said earlier, I don't think UBI makes markets like less free. I don't think that's like how people usually generally use the term. Like having a flat tax makes markets like less free. So if we just look at the interventions that we can characterize as making markets less free, I think on average they reduce people's freedom. And I think we just have a very simple point to make that look at all the freest countries in the world. Those are countries with relatively liberal markets. And I would define freedom as ability to actualize one's will, which is like the definition that reconciles positive and negative freedom. So I would agree with what you're saying. And I think like you can make the argument that single payer would have would have the net impact of increasing people's freedom, possibly. But I would just argue that, well, look at all these other different government interventions that are done all the time that obviously reduce people's freedom. So on balance, freer markets.
So I would say to answer the question, Micah sounds like he's a soft agree. STL's a soft disagree. I'll say soft disagree as well. My logic is just that there's so many examples of government decommodification, government services, government regulation across all societies. STL mentions typically when you aggregate the most democratic and what we might call free societies, it's countries like the Nordic countries, even America, European societies, Southeast Asia, Asian tigers, places like this. All of these countries have an extraordinary amount of government involvement. So I wouldn't take it to be the case that it's always like, by answering disagree, it's not to say that we should just regulate the shit out of every single market, but it is to say that I would generally disagree with this framing that, just generally speaking, a principle that I hold is like when we open up markets and get rid of government regulation, that necessarily makes people more free and better. That's the logic that I'm using to answer this question. Obviously, our logics might be different for each of these questions, and that's fine. So we've got one agree, two soft disagrees. I'll put a neutral on this one because we're all soft.
If I change mine to strong disagree, would that change where it puts it?
If you feel
strong disagree is an incredibly cringe response.
If you feel strongly on this, you can.
I bet you if you had some way to plot this relationship, the effect would be like close to flat. That
there is people who plotted this. There's like the Economic Freedom Index, and then you can look at other indexes. I think.
Well, STL, what's your final answer? Mike is a soft agree. I'm a soft disagree.
I will become a strong agree if you become a strong disagree. We can strategic vote each other out.
We'll get rid of the strategic voting. While you're putting the vote in, I just wanted to say the guy who wrote the book, he's more of like a center leftist. The book called Freedom from Markets, I believe. Konskal, I think, recently joined the Council of Economic Advisors in Biden's administration. So like, good step forward towards the kind of stuff like, hey, being in a market all the time, constantly buying and selling stuff is not the same thing as being truly free to actualize your desires. What is it? The transaction cost is one of the central theories for why firms form, that like to participate in a market has costs. So constantly buying and selling something, like every time you have to put a quarter into a machine, that's a cost on you. Every time you have to think about what health insurance to buy, that's a cost. There are real values sometimes to just being like, nope, we're just going to give everything to everyone, and you just don't think about it. Like you've gotten rid of the cognitive load, you've gotten rid of the search. Like I think there's real benefits sometimes to eliminating some markets.
The freedom of less choices.
Next
Literally,
up,
yes.
So I'll put a neutral for the podcast. Next up, we have, it is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens.
This question is so weird because it's like, is it asking us if we think we should deficit spend to support welfare programs? Like, I mean, it seems like clearly we don't think that we should be deficit spending to support welfare programs. We should use taxing. But I suppose if there's two options, right? One option is you just let a bunch of people starve and like kids be in poverty. Option two is we borrow to like not make that happen. Then sure, like we should borrow money.
Yeah,
to, like,
I think that's clearly. I think the framing is just in general. If you have a welfare maximizing policy, but at the cost of some amount of deficit spending, essentially, would you take that, or would you choose not to have deficit spending? I mean, I would say in that regard, I would disagree that it's the balanced budget is not as important as welfare maximization if that's really the choice that you're presented with. Your mic's not working yet.
Micah, you're muted.
Micah.
Oh, he's back.
Oh, there you go. You're back. Speak, Micah. What were you saying?
I mean, just like look at the ROI of investments in preventing childhood poverty. Right, like the ROI is enormous over the course of their life. Lower crime rates, higher rates of productivity, higher rates of human capital formation, higher employment rates. So it's just like not even clear whether the long-term fiscal impact of that deficit spending is negative on the fiscal health of your country. Right?
It sounds like this is our first universal agreement. We're all soft to disagree on this one. I take it.
Yeah, I'd say soft.
STL, disagree.
And that's mostly just based on sort of what Mike was talking about. And as we talked about on the debt episode, that there can be very high ROI on deficit spending in certain programs in such a way that like, it's like taking out a loan. You are spending a lot of money now, yes, but the returns on it 20 years down the line are so worth it that it would make sense to take out that loan of deficit now. So it's just
this question, it's gonna be one, I think. All right, publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. How do we feel about this?
I don't even know what this means, right? Like I do both, right? I like publicly funded research.
But which one's better, Micah? That's what it's saying. I think basically.
Does doing public like is the public funding of research going to necessarily crowd out the private research?
This question has the implicit assumption that there's 100% crowd out.
It's like if there's 100% crowd out, then I guess like no, like I mean, why would we tax and impose deadweight laws just to replace?
Well, I think it's just saying, is there a utility essentially to tax, publicly funded research, or is it better from a consequential sense to just not tax and spend on public research and leave it to the market, right? I mean, that's
no. I mean, we should spend money on public research.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that we've done an episode on intellectual property or anything like that, but I think there's a lot of reasons to believe that for-profit research tends to be decent at later stage research stuff, which is like the step before production or the step before production. But basic research is like objectively the domain of very long-term contracts, and objectively either mega corporations or the government is the best investor in those. And since I don't trust, mega corporations have a profit incentive, but there can be a social utility calculation by governments in doing research funding.
Yeah.
So it's just,
yeah. And it doesn't even have to be government administered. I mean, you can use patent prizes, you can have independent institutes, right? So like, but there's clearly like a market failure there in providing like a big bulk of the research. So yes, I agree.
Like we're
Should
all agree. I'm a soft agree on it. I think it's not as if all research should be publicly funded, but
I'll do a strong agree, because I know maybe we'll talk about this sometimes in an IP episode, but like I am of the view that it would be nice to have as many things be public domain as possible. And in that world, because I think that would have a lot of positive impacts on like technology transfer. And in that world, you need to have like way more public funding. So
all right, I put it a soft agree for the podcast 2-1, but we generally agree, obviously, that publicly funded research is important. Next question. Tariffs on international trade are important to encourage local production.
Strongly disagree.
We got strong disagree from Micah. SDL.
I either disagree or strong disagree. Like it's...
Yeah, we're all strong disagree on this one, it sounds like. I mean, tariffs just don't really... Again, there's just better... If your big thing is local production, the tariffs just aren't the best way to do that, even if that was your goal, right? So we've talked about that before. See our tax bracket episode for that discussion. Next up, this is a extremely philosophical question. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. That's it. I agree or disagree.
It's really strange, right? Because like obviously to some extent we all believe in that because we believe in a universal healthcare program.
There's a spectrum of agreement and disagreement here, Micah. You just have to choose amongst them.
But it's just like do we say like, is this our fundamental principle? So we need to agree with this. Like if I agree with this for like 20% of national income or 30% of national income, do I agree with this statement or do I disagree?
So there's an interesting argument that market socialists raise that like, markets are institutions. They are essentially an attempt to plan human behavior through competition and force it to align with social values, right? And so that a well-functioning market theoretically is promoting social utility. That's like the argument for market socialist. And since you're a fairly interventionist neoliberal, like I think you might be able to weirdly make that market socialist argument.
That's not even like that's my exact analysis of what markets are, right? Like the reason why markets are valuable is because they align people's incentives with the social good, and we need interventions in order to fix misalignments of incentives. But I don't know what threshold of agreement with this phrase I need to have in order to actually say agree. So I'm going to say neutral.
You're going to say neutral. I'll say agree because I think
Marx is the Staccato boy. Blast that Soviet anthem. That's
in general,
coming down from the heavens.
This is essentially just a defense of the welfare state, all right? I mean, when we think about if we frame the welfare state as transferring income from workers to non-workers. I mean, what else encapsulates that fundamental perspective, basically, than, socially speaking, we think it's a good thing to take from people's abilities, right, their work, and redistribute it to people who need it, people who cannot work. And so I'm a soft agree on this. I mean, obviously, I'm not a strict egalitarian in the sense that everyone should have the same consumption. It's just not possible presently, but certainly soft agree from my perspective.
So part of what Marx is trying to get at in this is what you'd call directly social production for use, which is the idea that markets are sort of this intermediate step where you've got to produce something and then you've got to sell it, and then the buyer on the other end decides what's useful. And Marx envisions a society where we simply directly know what to produce and produce it. And so as a market socialist, I pretty strongly disagree with the idea that you can have direct social production for use. I don't think it's possible to intuit what people need. Instead, you need some mechanism to do that. So we do through democratic elections, surveys, and yes, planned markets, essentially, that if you give people a bunch of ways to express their needs, then you can actually design a society that's really good at fulfilling them.
And for that reason, you strongly agree with it? Okay, so if we've got agree, neutral, strongly disagree, I'll say agree for the podcast-wide answer. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Next question.
Wait. You said STL said strongly disagree, right?
Strongly agree.
Strongly agree.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Next question. Go on. We're moving on. No more of your socialist nonsense, STL. Okay. We can only have so much marks per episode before people stop watching. All right. Next question.
We're gonna pick up a different audience.
It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. Guys, we've got to be strongly disagree. Across the board, guys.
So
private charity is cringe. Just funnel it all through government programs. Big government for the win. We all agree on that one. Okay, there you go.
Can I make you pull up a tiny graph real quick, Akana boy? One sec.
You can try. if I can find it. Send it in the Brain Trust chat.
Yep. Brain Trust. It's just so there's this really interesting graph which I put together of charity spending in the United States versus social spending in the United States. And so just to give an idea of part of the reason why abolishing everything in favor of private charity is not a good idea is just because there's hard limits on how much charity you can get. The United States is, and this might sound sort of crazy, is probably the most charitable society on Earth, possibly in the history of humanity. And that's because we spend 2% of GDP on charity. 2%, $1 in $50 goes to charity. It was lower than that in virtually every society that we have good records for, ever before. And for comparison, US social spending is on the order of 25% of GDP. So we're talking 10 times higher. There's just no way.
Don't you know that every single dollar of welfare spending crowds out $80 billion of
That's
charity
definitely true.
spending? Don't you know this?
So there's just no way to have a welfare net with charity, and caps is more insane.
STL does not take this seriously. I will say, when I actually tried to look into to really answer the question, to what degree is there actually crowding out between private, or basically private social spending and public social spending is kind of what we're talking about here. And the answer is, it seems like the answer is that there's probably some amount of crowding out. Like, for instance, they've done behavioral experiments where they'll say, oh, here's $10. How much of it do you want to keep yourself? How much do you want to give to charity? And then they'll do the same thing, but they'll say, we have a social program that gives this amount of money to people, and the amount of charity that people intuitively want to give goes down when the presence of social spending exists. Now, the caveat to that is that if you just look at this graph, we are not, nor would we ever be in a situation where 30% of the GDP is donated benevolently to people in need. We've never lived in a society like that. Some libertarians will try to make the case, well, back before we had welfare, we had mutualist societies and nobody lived in poverty and everything was great. That's just not true. It's just a lie. It's a historical fiction that people have made up.
Well, and if you zoom out a tiny bit, you can see the legend, and it shows that the green line at the bottom is an estimate. It's not all mutual aid societies, but it's 300 of the big ones. it was like 0.1% of GDP. Because what you got to remember is mutual aid was just insurance. Like people will put all these glorifications on either from the left or the right. Like people were working for each other. They were lifting each other up. Yeah, they were paying dues to an organization that paid them money out when they got sick or died. That's insurance. You buy that nowadays. That's called life insurance or health insurance. And they died because they weren't as efficient as the health insurances and also Lyndon Johnson.
There we go. We agree. We agreed so hard. We all independently went on a rant about how dog shit this argument is about private charity subsuming the role of public social spending. So anyway, let's move on to the next question. Next question: taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. How do we feel about this one?
Agree. I mean, like, just, obviously I want more wonky taxes, but land value tax, that's socializing all land rents, right? And like, that's a huge tax hike on wealthy people.
SDL feigning shock.
A cash flow tax, that would, if you raise it to the rate that I'd like, that'd be a tax hike on wealthy people. So yes, tax rich people more using economically smart mechanisms.
There we go. We got an agree. SDL, are you a strong agree or a soft agree on this one?
Definitely a strong agree. I think there's a real harm, in addition to providing for the poor, there's just a real harm of super rich people existing. So I've argued before for like confiscatory taxes on the hyper wealthy.
There we go. I would say soft agree for myself as well. I think, the truth is, like, we tax how do I put this? Like the marginal dollar on very, very rich people in terms of the taxes, even in America, is relatively high. So I wanted to eventually do the episode on how high can taxes actually go, because I think that'd be an interesting question just to research. But I'm not sure how much higher it could realistically go. But so I don't know. But maybe it could go much higher if I really looked into it. Right now, I'm a soft agree. I'll go soft agree for the podcast wide answer. But I'm open. I'm open to a strong agree in the future.
Well, it's just like, even if you have even if you think that effective marginal tax rate should be 70% for very high income people, which seems to be like more on the left wing view of things, it's just like, well, when you combine in sales taxes, which hit the wage base, and then you look at state income taxes, and then you look at payroll taxes, both state and federal, and then you consider that we're probably going to uncap payroll taxes because almost everybody supports that on the left. To save Social Security. Mm-hmm. Well, then you just kind of start realizing, like, unless we start using these more wonky mechanisms that are more unconventional, there's not too much more room for tax hikes without having tax hikes that are so high that it actually is revenue negative, which would obviously just be a bad thing to do.
All right, next question. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. SDL, let's start with you. What do you think?
Pretty strong disagree. Like, even from a liberal meritocratic perspective, there have been arguments for abolishing inheritance just on the grounds that it is not earned by the person. I want to say, I don't know if Thomas Paine argued for abolishing inheritance, but I believe he argued for at least an inheritance tax to fund a sort of universal basic income that people would get at the age of 18. So like, this has a long tradition of inheritance does not reward work. It doesn't encourage people to be more productive. It just doesn't have any social useful benefits as far as we can tell. That'd be the position.
SDL, or no, not SDL. Micah, is inheritance a legitimate form of wealth?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out what I think legitimate means here. Like, I think
Sure.
that we all believe that property is a social construct, right? So I suppose that legitimacy could be basically like, it should be recognized as a form of wealth that like is justly like a form of wealth that we recognize, and like a source of wealth that we recognize and is valid. I suppose like. I would disagree a little bit to the extent that I think inheritance is not as legitimate as like, your wages. I don't think inheritance should be zero. I don't think we should have a 100% tax on inheritance just because of the effect that has on people working. So many people work to derive extra income so they can pass it on to future generations. But I think if we had like an inheritance tax with a big exemption, we'd basically be saying, hey, you can pass on your wealth to other people. You can give it as inheritance, but you just need to give it to a lot of people. If you give like $10 million to one person, every single dollar above the $1 million exemption is going to get taxed at 50% or something like that.
Yeah. So I would, to the extent that Because I feel like we all know inheritance taxes don't really raise a lot of money, right? And so it's a very sort of I
It's a
would say it's a
behavioral
very
thing.
it's a sort of very behavioral, sort of ideologically driven justification for either inheritance or estate taxes. And so yeah, in that regard, I'm in the same boat as Mike. I would go soft disagree on this one. We should certainly have inheritance taxes, and SDL is a strong disagree. So I'll go soft disagree for the podcast answer and for my own answer. So next up, basic utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. I guess I'll start with this one. I will say, personally, I'm a soft agree on this one. I won't say strong agree because obviously I'm sure that there's examples where like community consent and like people might just not want certain things to be public utilities or whatever. I'm not sure, but in my own ideal world, like yeah, I would say that pretty much yeah, we would have like everyone would have public utility, electricity, and public roads would be public, right? And other whatever you might call a utility like water and internet or whatever, like yeah, we should have some sort of public option, public utility for these types of services. So I would soft agree myself. SDL, I can only imagine what you'll say to this, but what's your answer?
Look, we should privatize all the roads, but nationalize all the electricity.
Oh, wow.
More seriously, yeah, make everything a toll road and force everyone to ride on the public bus. No, I think that roads are a good example of something where there are really positive social spillover effects from infrastructure building. It doesn't make a lot of sense for markets to handle those because they don't reap the social rewards. So like they would either undersupply roads in areas where there are huge spillovers and possibly oversupply in areas where there aren't many spillovers. So we're talking stuff like, just being able to get to work. The road can't charge that except for like tolls or whatever, and they can't reap all the benefits of people being able to go to work and like create inventions or whatever. So there's just, infrastructure spending in general is a great domain of the state because it can reap those rewards. Like it's really just that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I agree with that. I mean, you can imagine a situation where we have a full land value tax and then we basically like subsidize road construction, infrastructure construction based on its impact on local land values. So if it makes local land value tax revenue may go up, we like divert automatically all of that to the private road provider. But the issue is their monopoly, right? Like you need to use the road, you live in the area, and there's only one road that takes you where you need to go, right? And there's just an administrative difficulty of collecting tolls from everybody. Like, is it going to be privatized sidewalks as well? Are we going to collect tolls from? We have a camera on. Okay, you took 15 steps. Okay, that's going to be 1 cent. I mean, it's just impractical. Now, regarding electricity, I don't have a super strong opinion about how it should be owned. So I'll say just a soft agree because in general, there's a lot of utilities like roads, which should be at least predominantly publicly owned.
Yeah,
alrighty.
and I will say one other argument actually is that sometimes roads can be negative. So like I think we're all, I don't know if we're all anti-car or car neutral, or whatever.
Anti-car activists.
but like there is a degree to which right now we subsidize roads too much, and like it probably does require some level of planning to be able to get rid of something that people use to commute and also build up like something else. Like unless you had a company which was simultaneously building up trams and like roads or something, I just think it would be hard to, I don't know. I think this is an example where you genuinely need planning, and it's hard to do that without something with the scope of the state. So that's all.
All right, I'll go soft agree for the podcast wide answer. Next question. Government intervention is a threat to the economy. And I feel like we've already kind of answered this with the freer the markets, freer the people. So why don't we just quickly give our answers? I'll say, I guess I'll go soft agree on this one. I mean, obviously in theory, we should think that the government could be a threat to the economy. Generally speaking, is it a threat? I mean, I guess maybe I would say I'm neutral on that question. Then if is government bad for the economy? I mean, I'm not sure, but yeah. SDL, what do you think?
So I would probably put disagree, just because there are a lot of cases where state intervention can expand markets. So people have pointed to examples like, regulation of foods can actually expand the food market, because if someone knows that the food isn't poisoned, they'll eat more. So like, I agree that a lot of government interventions do, but I think that in principle, I don't think there's a reason to believe that there's like a strict relationship between government intervention and economic poor well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a strict relationship. Obviously, it'd be dogmatic to say government intervention is always good or always bad. I would just make the same argument I made previously on balance. Like, I can list to you a gazillion government interventions that are genuinely a threat to the economy. The government could just completely destroy the economy in an instant, right?
So,
I cannot list to you a gazillion good government interventions. So since I just think the list is longer, for
education, healthcare, like we can, I don't know. It feels
like
police,
Micah.
Let's talk about occupational licensing. Let's talk about permit restrictions. Let's talk about the inordinate number of bad regulations currently on the books. Let's talk about trade restrictions, immigration restrictions.
I mean, I'd have to guess though, Micah, that if we're balancing if we're making a utilitarian case, I'd have to say that public school and public police alone have to provide so much social utility that it outweighs the fact that it takes 2 years to build a infrastructure project or something.
I don't know if this question is saying government intervention of like providing police, like that's the kind of thing
that is a decommodified market, Micah.
But like,
think about it.
I think whenever, like, because y'all said previously, like, okay, I'm just going to try to answer this question based on like what they're meaning by it. I don't think they're saying like, okay, if you say agree, you think that there should be no cops. No, it's just like a general thing.
Not an extreme. Yeah, it's generally speaking, it's the utilitarian. I mean, we all have our own logics. I said that earlier for how to answer these questions. My logic, I would say, I guess I brought myself to a neutral. STL's a disagree, but my logic is that it just seems like if you're saying the question, on balance, it's certainly it would be the case that I can come up with a lot of aggregately extremely positive
economic interventions. I would narrow it to economic interventions. Those interventions on balance.
I guess what I would point to an on balance thing is that like we live in one of the most regulated societies in human history. We also have some of the most positive government interventions in human history, and I think the net result of that is like we're also one of the most productive societies in history.
I think you could reduce like the regulatory burden in the United States by a good like 60%, and things would probably be net better.
You might be right. I guess I'm just trying to point to, like, when you're talking about netting out the difference, trying to speak to sort of what Econoboy said, like public education just wasn't a thing for most of human history. We did it, and that led to like oodles of economic growth. It's almost impossible to measure what percent of economic growth. I'm measuring in oodles, so 10 oodles of economic growth came out of public education.
Well, all right. It sounds like well, yeah, myself. I'm a neutral. SDL is a disagree. Micah, you're an agree. It sounds like. So we're at a classic neutral,
perfect neutral
for the podcast, of course, perfectly balanced as all things should be. Next question: those with a greater ability to pay should receive better healthcare.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like some people say no. I disagree with this on like some sort of moral basis, but it's just like it. Obviously, the government standard of care is not going to be the highest possible standard of care that there could be. It's just obvious it's never going to be that way. And so, like, I don't think there's any benefit of prohibiting people for paying more for a higher standard of care, especially when you consider that supply is elastic. It's not that what happens if you let people have, private insurance or a supplemental private insurance plan or something like that, or just direct out-of-pocket pay. It's not like what happens is they just skip the line and like it makes everybody else proportionally worse off. It expands the supply of healthcare and provides marketplaces for new pharmaceuticals, drugs, and medical procedures that would not have marketplaces otherwise. And the benefits of those marketplaces being established eventually get to everybody else. If that marketplace was not there, those innovations would not have the market they need to support them.
Micah sounds like a strong agree on this one. SDL, what are your thoughts?
So I would probably be a disagree, because I agree partially with what Micah said. There can be examples where people who have like an exorbitant amount of money to spend on experimental treatments can probably expand the supply of those. However, a enormous portion of healthcare spending in this country is just like elder care and what's sometimes called heroic care. People who are like going to die or very unlikely to survive, who are just extending out their life for a longer period of time. And it's not clear that that has a socially positive utility. So like I'm literally doing like the the grandma should die on the Obamacare health rationing panel's argument, but like there's genuinely an argument that we spend too much on certain kinds of healthcare, and that should be restricted even if you have the ability to pay. Like it should just go to something.
So you're old, and you want to spend money to keep yourself alive, and SDL says no, you cannot.
Pretty much, yes.
Have a low standard of care, so you just die earlier.
Pretty much, yes. I don't hold to escape the utilitarian conclusion there, though, right? Because
that's insane. So it's crazy.
If you look at the extreme example, so NHS did a review of people who are in a vegetative state, so they're not even experiencing anything, right? But they have often very extensive life experiences, like they just keep going on living and living and living, and yet they never wake up. People who are in a permanent vegetative state just do not wake up. Like there's no way out. So the question is, does providing that healthcare provide a social utility? And I think the answer is pretty clearly no.
To their family. If that's something that so if paying for that service maybe provides utility for my family, the people around me, or maybe it provides utility to me in the fact that I know that they would keep me alive, or maybe I'm more encouraged to work because this is the kind of thing I could spend money on. I mean, it's worthwhile to afford people that option, but I would just say that like it's not all healthcare is just late life of care for people that are vegetables.
And so I understand. I'm pointing to an extreme example, but what I would suggest is there's some spectrum between things where you need extra funding to increase supply, so like experimental care. And if we had a world in which there was way more public research, especially more basic research, I don't know that you would even need excess payments from people to be spurring that innovation. Like if you already have a patent system, if you already have, I guess my point is, I think that the benefits are marginal, but positive in that case. That's why I'm just to disagree. I don't think you should like ban extra healthcare spending, but there's limited benefits. And they're in the cases where there's a competitive emerging market, but the cases where there's negative are really large, actually.
I don't see how there's any negative impacts at all. I mean, you're just saying that they're spending their money on wrong things. Like your preferences are wrong. You know, you shouldn't be able to use your money on that. But like, I think that it's just really weird because you want super, super high taxes, and then you want to ban a bunch of things that you can use extra income on. So it really just seems that like in your world, there's really no incentive to like become high income because you're not going to keep any of the money, and you can't even use it on anything you might want.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's tons of other consumption, but that consumption
you just want to ban those too. You want to ban private planes. Like I feel like every video it's like you want to ban something.
Well, Micah, obviously there's I don't think most people necessarily have the desire or the motive to, you know, or the practical ability to like buy a private plane or live in a $20 million mansion. So, I mean, in theory, right? Even if in SDL's world you ban houses of a certain size and you ban private plane rides, it's like that doesn't seem to hit 99% of people anyway, presumably.
Oh no, but if you're banning spending more money on healthcare, that absolutely impacts people. Like you know, even if I want to pay for nicer gowns and a nicer hospital stay, and like you know, maybe nurses spend more time with me, right? Like that's my right.
Well, I think I would. But the thing is,
enhancing.
Okay, so
it's not like a ridiculous luxurious expenditure or anything like that.
My concurrent opinion on this one is, I feel like I would disagree with this, but for different reasons than SDL. Like obviously SDL is thinking more about the, I suppose he's thinking more about the upper end. Obviously this is a question sort of focused on the upper end, but I'm just thinking more on the lower end of people who provide healthcare, where I think of this question, the mirror of this question, where should people with a less ability to pay receive worse healthcare, which is sort of the same question if you really think about it. And I think that it would probably be reasonable to say that, well, no, obviously, you know, just because you don't have an ability to pay, we should still, as a society, we should still strive to offer an equitable, quality access of healthcare to everyone. And I don't know if that's. I feel like that's a decent principle to govern ourselves by. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we should, in my view, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should abolish your ability to, like you said, you know, go to a private hospital or like have your own personal doctor that you have on retainer.
That's what the question is. It says those with a greater ability to pay should receive better healthcare. It doesn't say that they're the only ones who should receive any healthcare or a decent quality healthcare.
Well, it is because it bakes into it the idea that there's a certain quality of healthcare that is gatekept from lower income people because they do not have the ability to pay for it. And
that's like any system in which there's a government standard and there's ability to get better, and you let people get better is a system in which people that have greater ability to pay do receive better health care.
My point though is that I do feel like a lot of quality forms of healthcare should be equitably distributed to people despite their ability to pay at the point of service, right? So I think that's where, and I feel like we agree with that. That's just my logic for answering the question. You have a different logic, obviously, but I feel like generally speaking, of course we agree, and we in our healthcare episode we of course discussed the idea that of course it's the case that despite your ability to pay, you should have some equitable, egalitarian access to basically quality healthcare, right? I mean, we all believe in universal healthcare as mandated by the government through regulations and subsidies and or decommodification, depending on what your preferred model is, right? So there you go.
I feel like we might. This might be a long episode if we don't.
Micah's broken. His brain has broken in response to my radical egalitarian logic, but I'm a soft
mic drops and moves on.
I offered a concurrent opinion, a disagreement for a different reason than SDL, who's also a soft disagree. Mike is a strong agree, so I'll put the podcast answer as neutral.
Voting wins again.
Those with
We're
the greater
just gonna come out as a centrist. The show is going to come out as like just gray on every single.
True. Quality education is a right of all people. I would strongly agree with this.
We should probably
Micah, what do you think?
Yeah, of course.
Are you a soft agree or a strong agree?
Strongly agree.
My God, we all agree. Despite your ability to pay, you should have a quality education, says Micah Irfan. Unbelievable.
Yes, and then if people want to pay even more for like, I don't know, the super deluxe private tutor education, only one person in the classroom, they reserve that right.
The means of, this is quite an on-the-nose question, the means of production should belong to the workers who use them. I would disagree with this.
Yeah, I strongly disagree with that one.
So I would strongly disagree, but we're for esoteric reasons. It's that the people who use it directly shouldn't own it. It's that they should have some ownership. Society should have some ownership. Yeah, like it's social ownership. It's not workers in the factory ownership. But
there we go.
And also non-workers, right? Like I think this is like this is part of the reason why your view on socialism is much better than a lot of people. Like, hey, if you're a pensioner or like you're a kid, you should also like, have a share of you're part of the social wealth fund too. You matter as well.
For what it's worth, like when Mark, going back to Marx, when they talk about social ownership of the means of production, they usually do like literally Marx back in 1870 or something included a social dividend in his plans. Like you deduct from everyone's wages the capital investment bit, the bit to pay for everyone's welfare, and then the rest goes back to the workers. That's it. So his view is sort of like there's just a cut that goes to capitalists and you give that to workers, but you still have to invest in machines and do welfare. So I don't know. In fairness to Marx, he does acknowledge non-workers.
Well, because Marx doesn't even advocate for. He really advocates for pure social ownership. It seems like in the Critique of the Gotha program. So,
yep.
There we go. So it seems like we're all a strong disagree for various different reasons. So I'll put strong disagree as the podcast answer. Next question, automatic strong disagree. The United Nations should be abolished. Strong disagree, guys? I mean, can we agree? Okay. SDL, are you one of these weird anti-internationalist socialists who doesn't like the United Nations?
No, the United Nations should be stronger, and we should get rid of the veto Security Council. Just shouldn't exist.
My wife sitting next to me says, quote, they are ineffective. So maybe my wife is a cringe anti-UN.
There are studies on UN peacekeeping, and they like demonstrably work. When they've been done, they have a 70% chance, I think, of stopping the war permanently. So like the answer is just give them more money and more guns. It's really that simple. Give them $14 trillion and 10,000 men.
There we go. Strong disagree across the boards for non-cringe reasons. Next question. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it.
Often? What the U.S. has done in the last 20... What protect... I'm sorry.
I just often... Like, sometimes... there's not that many cases in which the United States has really needed to blow anybody up for our own protection.
So it sounds like we're soft disagreeing with this across the board. And our disagreement is with often. It's just not every day we need to invade a country or something to protect ourselves.
I would say strongly disagree. It sounds like disagree or strong or whatever. We'll win it.
It's also just like it's military. Like it's not even. Yeah, I don't know.
Next question.
I'd say disagree.
And I put soft disagree for the podcast wide answer. Next question. I support regional unions such as the EU. I strongly agree with this as well. SDL, don't be cringe. Come on, give us the sweep on this one. Don't be one of those weird, the EU's bad. I support the S&P.
SCL.
Literally the only reason I can think
DL.
of no. The only reason I can think of is for saying no is that like the ideal world is a federal world in which it's all under the UN, and maybe regional unions make that less likely. Like maybe there's a path-dependent world where regional unions work too good, and so that we never do the world union. But yeah, I don't know. Strongly agree.
Strongly agree. Thank God for that. All right, next question. It is important to maintain our national sovereignty. SDL, what do you think about this one?
It is.
Obviously disagree, right? I mean, you just said that you want a one world government, so
yeah. The only thing I'm thinking of is like, like it would be bad if the United States was invaded and dismembered, probably. So like, if that's the question they're going for, war to destroy national sovereignty, bad. But like, yeah, I don't believe in. I think nation states are a bad way to do governance. So probably strongly disagree.
Strongly disagree, says SDL. Micah, how do you feel about this question?
Yeah, I would say disagree. I don't know. I used to be like more like global federalism pilled. I am more concerned just with the practicality of that, even like as an ideological item, just because of like how it would actually practically manifest. But clearly, I believe like if we could have a North American regional union, I think that'd be fantastic. If we could have more power to the United Nations and international organizations, that would necessarily come at the expense of some sovereignty.
Well, obviously,
and
yeah.
I mean, it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Things like the UN, the EU, trade agreements, immigration liberalization, these are all things that almost sort of necessarily lead to the slow march to a essentially a world government, right? You know, your governance is crossing the boundaries of just your own borders. So I would do a soft disagree with this one as well. Obviously, the exact, if a country's invading your country, should you just do nothing and allow yourself to be taken over? I mean, well, probably not, right? So it depends on exactly how you interpret that question. But it sounds like we're all a soft disagree for various reasons. Next question. A united world government would be beneficial to mankind. I mean, SDL's already answered this question. Strong agree, it sounds like.
Strong agree. UN #1 soldier right
there
here.
There we go. Like the Futurama flag, where it's the American flag, but the Earth on the top left corner instead of the stars, basically, is what it sounds like.
That's right.
Micah, how do you feel about this question?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'd say agree, because I mean, just think about existential risks of nuclear war, of like AI development, using AI for military purposes. Like, there's just so many ways all of humanity could completely die just by having like nation states. So it seems like if you could have a one world government, especially one that is deeply, there's lots of federalism and decentralization of power and like a very democratic model, seems like that'd be beneficial. So I'd say agree.
Yeah, I would do a soft agree with this one as well. Obviously, if you could snap your principally speaking, would it be good if we could all live in a united democratic world government? I mean, of course, I would say yeah. I mean, I don't fear the the government that is made up of 40% Chinese and South Asian people or something. A lot of people have these weird like, oh my goodness, if we had a world government, that means that we would be governed 40% by all these Chinese and South Asian. It's like, well, they're just people. Presumably too, it doesn't scare me too badly. So
how about a one world government, and that government is the United States of America?
I know my proposal has always just been imagine you have your regional unions. What you might imagine is you need, say, 60% to get a law passed through for a regional union. So if you want to ban like bananas for all of South America, you need 60%. And then to do the ban bananas bill for the whole world, call it like 70%. Because it's actually pretty hard to get 70% of people on board with like random bills, especially as elected legislators. So I don't know.
Anti-majoritarian SDL. Wouldn't have expected it. But here we are. All right, next up. I put a soft disagree for that question for the podcast answer. Next up, question. It is statement, I suppose. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. This is wildly open to interpretation. I guess I would say, my answer to this, I would say, I guess soft disagree. I don't, it's hard to interpret.
It sounds like some Neville Chamberlain stuff out here.
This is pretty much just peace through strength. I that's how I read it anyway. So like pretty strongly disagree. That's actually been a Republican plank since Reagan, and that's why we invade all the countries all the time. So
I go soft disagree. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree that we should. I mean, like, it just sounds like some Neville Chamberlain stuff to be so real. I don't think that our priority should be, furthering our strength. But I don't also think that we should necessarily prioritize peaceful relations whenever it comes at abandoning our allies or sacrificing our values. So I'd say I'm neutral. I hate the question.
Well, I guess since SDL is a strong disagree, I'm a soft disagree. You're a neutral. I put soft disagree for our podcast answer, and then next question: wars do not need to be justified to other countries.
Disagree.
Very philosophical question. Micah says disagree right off the bat. SDL says strong disagree. I would say disagree as well. I mean, obviously, it's probably reasonable to say that, hey, you probably can't just, you probably don't have a moral case to invade any country you want just because the people within your country want to do it, even if it was the case. There's probably superseding moral norms that we could appeal to. Which is to say, essentially, internal country level democracy is not our highest moral value. So I would soft disagree. Sounds like STL's a strong disagree. I'm a soft disagree. I'll put soft disagree for the podcast answer as well as my own. Next up, military spending is a waste of money.
Disagree. It's like obviously military spending should not be zero. Obviously supporting Ukraine and Taiwan are worthwhile endeavors, and U.S. military and NATO can have a positive impact and have, historically in some instances had a positive impact on the world. The U.S. military, I think ideally would operate largely to fill in the gaps for international organizations like NATO and for UN peacekeepers to support UN peacekeeping operations. And historically, it in large part has, like fighting Somali piracy. So it's clearly not a complete waste of money, although the military may be misused sometimes. It should still definitely be around.
Military's waste of money?
Somewhere between agree and strongly agree. Just a lot of things that we do spend money on. So there's some things which have positive impacts, like military R&D is often on like ways to kill people more efficiently, but it has very positive spillovers because the ways to kill people efficiently are like miniaturizing technology and making it super efficient. But in my worldview, just do the non-military application. You could just do public basic research spending. A lot of the military spending we do could be replaced in part by like non-military missions or spending to the UN. Like permanent peacekeeping forces would be a lot better than having, basically, if you had a permanent peacekeeping force, which is a guy with a gun, which is fairly cheap, it's often a lot cheaper than building a shit ton of missiles. So just a lot of the military spending we do is not the most efficient way to bring about peacekeeping or those gaps that Mike is talking about. So the good parts of the military, I don't think we're spending for that. We're spending to kill Russia. We're spending to kill China and
to kill God.
I'll support.
All right, STL. It sounds STL. Are you a strong agree or just an agree on this one?
I'll say agree, just so we don't get any positional voting stuff. All
right, and Mike is a disagree. I would say disagree as well, just because basically for the same thing that Micah said. I mean, it sort of presumes the idea that the ideal amount of military, because if something is a waste of money generally, I would say it's almost presuming that the ideal amount is zero on that. I don't know if it's a value just to spend as little as you possibly minimally can towards the military. I'm not sure if that's even necessarily a good idea. So I would say soft disagree. For the podcast answer, I'll go neutral on this one. Or I guess we both, it's 2-1 disagree. I'll go soft disagree for this one. It could make some sense, I guess. But
damn it, I should have gone strong. Then we could have bleeded it out.
Military spending is a waste of
voting.
money.
This is why score voting is not the ideal voting system, folks.
All right, international aid is a waste of money. We've got to be strong disagree across the board on this one, right? Come on.
Yep.
We all love international aid on this podcast. It's a strong disagree from Three Wonks.
As long as it's well structured, like people will complain like, oh, international aid sometimes is ineffective. It's like, well, there's a lot of ways you can help people, right? Like maybe one way of giving people stuff is not effective. Doesn't mean you shouldn't give them anything at all. Some countries are poor. They need help.
My nation is great.
Agree.
Soft agree. SDL.
I think the implication of this is just nationalism. So no. Like the things that are great are like the values of my nation. Like I value the freedom of speech that we have, but the nation itself, like it doesn't even really exist.
There's like properties of nations, right? Like America has the property of being a liberal democracy. You could say like it has the property of having great attributes.
So I disagree with this pretty strongly, because one of the things we observe is that when governments do fall, often the governments that come next are very highly inspired by what came before. There's a lot of path dependence. So what does this mean? Well, when countries that had a history of democracy, like Japan or Germany, when they went into a fascist phase and then that got shut down, they actually had relatively strong democracies afterwards. So I think to a decent amount, values are like inculcated in people's minds. So I just
I don't think nation does it mean like the state of a nation? I feel like nation is like beyond just a government. It's like a social cultural.
The nation is more than just a state. SDL.
I really dislike the idea of reifying nations, meaning like making the idea that there's a group of people and there's some real defined entity into like a real thing. I don't think there is such a thing as an American nation. There's like a bunch of values that a bunch of people hold, but
clearly, it doesn't actually. It's a construct, right? But
sure.
I think that I would consider myself a civic nationalist. I think that we have tribalistic tendencies, unfortunately. But insofar that they are going to exist, we should probably harness them for productive purposes. And I think you can harness people's like tribalism to say like, okay, yeah, we're America. America's awesome. America's awesome because it loves freedom and like helping people, and we're like going to be the best at being awesome to everybody all the time, and we love peace, right? That's what we stand for.
STL's a soft disagree. Micah, you're an agree. I'll give myself I'd say agree on this one. I would give a soft agree.
Outvoted again, socialist.
We've got soft agree for the podcast wide answer. Next up, research should be conducted on an international scale. I mean, of course, strongly agree, right?
This is either a meaningless question or a strong agree. So like I was going to either say neutral because, research should be conducted on an international scale. It is. Like right now, all that you can just call up someone in another country. But presumably the question is something like, should there be international research agencies like CERN or whatever? And like then strong agree. So
but like, I guess this is a question like, should it be more international than it is? Like, should we move?
Well, it might just be asking a principle.
The answer is
right?
pretty clearly yes as well, because when you look at stuff like how the US is trying to build our own particle accelerator, how like the Soviet Union had its own shitty fusion, actually relatively good for the time fusion, and we were duplicating. Like there's just all this wasted effort. But it was shitty in absolute terms. But
all right, we're a strong agree across the board. Next question: government should be accountable to the international community. Got to be a strong agree.
Strongly agree.
SDL,
Strongly
presumably
agree,
strong agree. Okay, strong agree across the board.
I mean, that's part of what we're seeing in places like Israel right now, or like Ukraine, actually. So like Russia is not abiding by the law that you can't invade people, and Israel is not abiding by the law that you can't occupy people. And it's part of why the situation is so fucked. Yeah. So.
Next up, even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. I mean, strongly disagree. I feel like it's almost certainly it's the case if you're living in like Iran or something, or North Korea, that, if you want to form a violent resistance, it's probably reasonable to do so.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Iran for a second. So yeah, I'm half Iranian. And I think that like you've seen in Iran, there's been a lot of relatively peaceful uprisings against the government because Iranians they just don't like the government at all, right? And what happens? Well, nothing happens, right? Some people get shot by the cops, right? Some people like throw rocks, but ultimately they have the tools of violence to keep enforcing their coercive state. And sometimes you have to use that same tool to overthrow that coercive state. So like clearly violence is appropriate in some instances.
So I will say whatever the answer was, the pro-violence answer, that's the one I was for strongly. But the caveat I wanted to give to that is that violence as a tool is sometimes necessary, but is often not very effective. So like just a lot of the research on how revolutions like that were successful formed is that they required a really long, extensive period of building mass support and mass organizations like civil society organizations, underground organizations, and those basically wouldn't have worked if they were violent enough to justify state suppression. It removes how popular they are. It basically it gives a lot of reasons for the state to be able to legitimately suppress them. It turns people away from them. It reduces the size of people who are willing to get involved because they don't want to get involved in violence. So bluntly, like there is a real value of nonviolent resistance. And just speaking to that, when states do repress people, they almost always win. There in the study by Chenoweth and Stefan on this, I think it's a 10 times negative multiplier if the state decides to repress you on whether you beat the state. So like
Cuba,
just don't give them an excuse
SDL.
to do that.
What about Cuba? Hello?
You should not go shoot the government in Cuba. You should try to organize.
No, I'm
local
saying
democracy.
that Fidel Castro started a revolution with 40 people and a couple of guns in a bag or something. It was that's the story somewhat.
One of the big things. Okay, so I've read a lot of old socialist writing on revolution, and I'm just bringing this up as an interesting example. Engels in 1895, so he's nearing the end of his life, is writing on how things have changed from 1848. In 1848, millions of people rose up around Europe, and they all got crushed by the state. And he's sort of saying, well, we can't even try to do that anymore because the state has better guns, they have bigger militaries, they will just kill us. So like the only way that we can win, like the left power we want, is through some combination of building, yes, some ability to fight the government outside of the state, but also like you have to win mass popularity. You have to be able to win elections. If you couldn't have won an election, there's no chance you win a revolution. Like that's that's the rough. So just to give an analogy that in Russia, where the revolution worked relatively well, 70% of people identified as socialists and they were voting for Revolutionary Party. So like, if you don't have 70% of people on board, it's pretty hard is all.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, and it sounds like we're all a strong disagree for various nuanced reasons. I mean, in general, of course, it's just the case that like we're not pacifists. Like we think there's probably a utility to using violence. I mean, we're all Americans, right? American Revolution obviously was a violent revolution. So, what can you say? It's our tradition. Next up, my religious values should be spread as much as possible.
Yeah, this is like a very strange question, but just keep in mind this increases the religiosity bar. So if you say yes to this, it just makes it like more religious, more traditional. As opposed to the progress bar.
You can't be telling us that. That's game. We're not playing a game. We're answering real ideological questions, Mr. Micah.
Yeah, but it's like
these are pure questions.
But this is a question of like, are you religious or not?
It's not. It's not counting atheism as a part of religious values. I guess it sounds like.
Well, it's just like if you think that like spreading atheism as far as possible is like what you want to do. If you say strongly agree to this, it's going to make you come out more traditional and more religious on the like actual outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that regard, I'd have to put disagree, I suppose, if that's really the weird effect on this test. SDL, what do you think?
I mean, I think everyone who believes in really any worldview probably wants it to spread because you think it's true. It's just a question of how strong you believe and what the social implications of that are. So like, yes, I would want to see a more secular and probably a less religious society, but to what degrees of social tools would I be willing to use? Like not very many. I don't know. It seems like people are becoming irreligious extremely quickly if you just give them the internet and a secular education. So I don't know.
I guess we're all a strong disagree sort of functionally for the test. And what that translates into for the podcast wide answer is just that none of us are particularly religious people, I guess. So that's where you get that answer. All right, next up, our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. Pretty much the same thing. It's replace religion with nation's values.
I mean, well, like America tends to have more liberal values, I suppose. Like when we think about what are like, if you list the values that America has, right? What would it be? Democracy, freedom, right? Like opportunity, right? And so like those values, even if that maybe we don't live up to them all the time, those are good ones. Those should be spread. So I'd say I agree. More countries should have those stated values. That would be nice.
I argued before that I don't even really like the idea of like thinking of the U.S. as a nation, but insofar as like the US values of freedom or democracy are like the idealized values, yes, it would be nice to see them spread, but I'm pretty sure this is, if we're going to go on the bar-based question, I'm pretty sure this is the one which makes you more on the nationalist anti-global side. So I don't know. I would put strongly disagree, because I don't want America's values, including some of the bad ones. Like, we're relatively racist. We have a presidential republic, and presidencies suck, and I hate that. And we spread it all over South America, and it's terrible. I don't want any of that spread by force. So,
so Mike is an agree. STL is a strong disagree. I guess I'll just say neutral, because I don't know. It's hard for me to even think about how to answer this question, honestly. But so I'll personally say neutral. I guess given that, the podcast-wide answer, I'll go soft disagree. Next up, it is very important to maintain law and order. I mean, obviously, presumably strongly agree across the board.
No, so I like a little bit of chaos, actually. I'm a big Chaz fan.
Makes it exciting.
Say, we did earlier strongly agree that violence can be justified. And so the context I would argue is that sometimes law and order is like a tool of the state. Pretty explicitly, it's part of the rhetorical parlance of conservatives. So for the purpose of this test, I know where this bar is going, so I would put like strongly disagree or whatever, because I know where it's going. But in practice, there is a positive value to having regular ordered relations in society. And so like there is a value of having law and order, but not in the like insane conservative authoritarian way.
Yeah, but you're just a soft agree then. I mean, that sounds like...
I mean, because you're not going to say strongly disagree. I mean, you're not going to get anarchism as your result, right? Like, you believe in some law and order, so...
So agree or neutral. Just put one of those.
We outvoted you anyway if it's agree or neutral.
Yeah.
All right, so...
We should probably hurry up, guys.
Yeah, let's try to move through these a little bit quicker. Next up, the general populace makes poor decisions. I'm a strong disagree on this one. Big Democrat in this household. SDL, what do you think?
I want to put like disagree or neutral somewhere in there, because it really depends on the topic.
Depends.
It depends.
It depends. So it sounds like a neutral to me.
I think it's like, obviously the populace makes poor decisions. I mean, everybody knows the populace makes poor decisions. You just look at the average person; they make tons of bad decisions for their own life. Right?
Unbelievable.
I love this lifestyle. They're not saving enough for retirement. They don't have super particularly educated votes. Now, like it is the case that like democracy is cool, right? Like it's. The alternatives are bad, but I think insofar that we want to make democracy better, it's actually things that give aids to the populace in making decisions, so they make less poor ones, right? But Republicans win sometimes, so Republicans win all the time. So obviously the populace makes poor decisions. So yes, I would say definitely agree the populace makes poor decisions.
There we go. Okay, so we're a neutral as a podcast. This was our answer with the most disagreement so far. Next up, physician-assisted suicide should be legal.
Agree.
Strong agree.
Strong agree. I'm a soft agree, so we'll go soft agree on this one, just because I'm not sure how widely available it should be, but some broad agreement there. Next up, the sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism.
Strong disagree.
Well, it's just like some, I don't know, like some? What does that mean? Like clearly... There's probably some sacrifice.
Yeah. Also, what does civil liberty mean, right? When we create an apparatus that allows the state enforced police to stop me from traveling because they've arbitrarily decided I'm traveling too quickly. I mean, is this a infringement upon my liberties, right?
If your name, like if you have been on ISIS websites and then we found like that you have chats with an ISIS agent saying like, okay, I'm driving the bombs there now, right? Like, yes, right. Yes, like we can sacrifice some of your civil liberties, right? But like I just say softly agree, right? Because I'm a
very soft agree. If this was from 0 to 10 instead of strong disagree to agree, I'd be a 6 out of 10. Just above neutral on this one. And given that, I'd go neutral for the podcast since STL is a strong disagree. But all right, let's keep going.
Pro-terrorism STL.
Look, we said before that violence is justified. Okay, maybe we got to give him a little room, right?
That's true. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world.
Depending on how you define it, like either strongly agree or strongly disagree. The reason for this is to find out whether you're an authoritarian. So I'm going to put strongly disagree. But like, I don't know. I was thought like huge fan of censuses, huge fan of constant data taking. Like it's probably valuable to have stuff like census, like cell phone trackers to see what people are doing in their lives. I don't know. Like they provide a lot of interesting information about how humans work, and we want to build a society that makes people work well. So,
but you're a soft agree then. I mean that's.
Yeah, I feel like cameras.
I know where the bar is going, so I'm putting strongly disagree.
I feel like cameras in public places is like probably fine. Like I think my ideal system would be like you have to get like a court order to check certain like public footage, maybe
red light cameras, Micah.
What's that?
Red light cameras.
Red light cameras are so justified. Oh my god.
Oh no, yeah,
bro. STL, you're totally a soft agree on this. Stop being a coward.
No, but government surveillance. They're doing this is for like the terrorism section. They're not talking about government surveillance in terms of like, are you putting gum on the bus? They're talking about it in terms of like, are you willing to cut out people's freedom of speech to stop the terrorists? Like, are you okay with monitoring people's logs?
That's true.
That's absolutely the purpose of this question. Absolutely.
No, because the impact of this question is it makes you a little bit more authoritarian if you say agree, right? But it's like obviously, yeah, like it is a little bit more authoritarian to believe that we should have cameras above stoplights and to have cameras in parks. But like it's still like, yeah, it's get own libertarians. Like yes, like
you believe the government SDL should be able to photograph inside of my private domicile, my vehicle, when I'm freely traveling on the streets that I pay for? Are you shitting me, SDL? That's authoritarian, if you ask me, good sir.
I'm staying on my strong disagree.
Oh my god. Okay.
Like Etta just wants to be like get a libertarian result so bad, despite the fact that I think you're the most authoritarian of us three.
True. Lifetime.
I want cameras everywhere, okay, but we're not going to suppress anyone's freedom of speech. It's really that simple. I don't know.
Lifetime mandatory state education. SDL says, I'd hate to be an authoritarian. All right. So he says strongly disagree. Micah, I guess my answer is soft agree. Yours is a soft agree as well?
Yeah, it's a soft agree as well.
All right. I guess we're neutral on this one as a podcast.
That's so sad.
Next up, the very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. Agree or disagree?
What is that? Strongly disagree. What?
Yeah, so I would probably put disagree because it's true that most of the violations of liberty throughout history have been conducted by states. But by the same arguments that I was raising earlier, a lot of the ways that the state frees us, like this is a weird way to think of it, but it can free you from the tyranny of nature and from other people by like making you safe and providing basic necessities of life. So like in a very real way, you are more positively free. And I wouldn't like to call it the state. I would call it like the government or society or something along those lines. But yeah, like.
We love Big Brother on this podcast. It's a soft disagree from me, and so therefore it's a soft disagree for the podcast, 2-1. But we generally
very absence of the state would be a tremendous threat to our liberty, even more of a threat, right? So
Micah loves Big Brother more than any of us on this podcast. Next up, regardless of political opinions, it is important to side with your country. Strong disagree. Come on,
that's a strong disagree.
Easiest question of our lives. All authority should be questioned. I mean, strong agree. Who would disagree?
Also strong.
Come on, there we go. Including corporate authority, Micah? Question mark?
Yeah.
All right, there we go. He's consistent. All right, next up. A hierarchical state is best. This will be an interesting one. How do we feel about this one?
Like, is this time like a Chinese like pyramid style state? Like, I don't really know.
I think again they're trying to get sort of the anarchism bit
Interpret
of it.
It how you wish.
You can interpret it as you wish, but I'm pretty sure the gist of this is that, especially back, I think when this test was written, people were talking about like Noam Chomsky's idea of hierarchy as one of the keys of what states do. They put certain people above and certain people below, and they don't really justify why. And that's true of a lot of like other orders. You know, family can put one person to be strong, and other people really can't question them. And so, in that sense, as an egalitarian and a Democrat, I want to say strongly disagree. I think the state should try and provide everyone as equal ability to change like the decisions it makes as possible. Within the limits of their means to understand the policy, more or less.
And then it sounds like Micah's a soft agree on this one. I would say this is a tough one for me. I would say, so to SDL's point, I think ideally we would have as horizontal a distribution of political power as possible. So I suppose that if there were such a society where every individual question of the state action could be directly voted on by people, that would be an ideal if we assume that it would be possible to do that. However, it's probably not functionally very possible to do. So in that regard, not great. So I guess I would personally put neutral on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say disagree. I wouldn't say agree. I mean, I think that to the extent that I want to change the state, and we've talked about this in the past, it seems like all the things I want to change make it, quote unquote, less hierarchical, right? Like no president, executive council, right? Switch out your legislature for a more democratic one.
You've convinced me. Then we'll go soft disagree across the board, and we'll maintain the sweep then. Next question. It is important that the government follows the majority opinion, even if it is wrong.
I mean, then you support invading Iraq, right? Like clearly there should be some discretion amongst like elected officials in certain cases where it's just like not like whatever the poll is, right? It's like should there be a referendum and then we just say no to the referendum results? No, okay, like.
Yeah, I would say there's certainly room for, movement on this. Like for instance, I think a majority of people, I want to say I saw a poll that showed a majority of people don't support sending aid to Ukraine, but it seems like the overwhelming proportion of our lawmakers disagree with that, and they pass an aid bill. So I mean, I would say generally speaking, representative government is probably the best thing that we can come up with, and so we trust them to make some technical decisions which might not necessarily pass the sniff test of a majority of people. So in that regard, I would say soft disagree on this one.
I would say the threshold is a deliberated opinion, right? So if an opinion is like very strong in the public where they've really analyzed the issue and there's been a discourse about it, and it's the members of the public that have actually engaged in this deliberation that are participating in what we consider the majority opinion, then we have to do that.
Major question.
It shouldn't just be like, oh, Obamacare passed, Fox News says something bad about it, we don't like Obamacare, instantly now we have to repeal Obamacare as soon as it's passed, right? Like that would be a pretty dumb way to do decision making.
SDL, what do you think? What's your answer on this question?
I don't like the phrasing of the question because I think the gist of it should really be something more like, are people informed enough, or do people generally pick the right decision, and should we follow that? Because like it is tautologically true that if you want the best government, you should not follow the popular opinion when it is wrong. And that does, in reality occur somewhat frequently. So I don't know, you should design institutions to try and mitigate that. I'm just not sure how much you can do that. Like, we're talking about instances where the representatives are, in our opinion, picking the right thing against the will of the people. Well, they do the opposite all the time, right? They could have put a public option in, but they didn't, right? Like they could be doing paid leave, but they don't. And these are very popular things. And yet, only like 40% of the legislators do it. So I would just say like, I don't know, I would put neutral because I hate this question.
This is a freaking terrible question.
We got two disagrees and a neutral. I'll go disagree for the podcast wide answer. The stronger the leadership, the better.
Strongly disagree.
Oh, this is a strong disagree.
Very sort of essentialist question. So yeah, I mean, we've got a strong disagree. It doesn't seem to necessarily follow. Next up, democracy is more than a decision-making process.
Strongly agree. Absolutely.
Strong agree.
There are spillover effects of a democratic process that we would say are valuable, essentially.
Sure.
So, next up, environmental regulations are essential. Strongly agree. Come on, guys. Come on, strongly agree. Next up, a better world will come from automation, science, and technology. This will be interesting.
Strongly agree.
I thought Michael was going to say something about like X risks or whatever. Yes, strongly agree.
I would strongly agree. I would put the caveat that specifically with automation and technology, I do feel like there's a lot more external there's a lot more externalities to certain things than I think we originally realized. Like I think social media is the best example where like it seems on its face like, oh, a more connected world where I can interact with people all across the world of different backgrounds and keep track of like the day-to-day goings on of people around me in a better way. That seems like sort of a necessarily good thing, but there's so many negative effects, it seems like, of something like social media that we just didn't anticipate. And I wonder what technological advancements will come next that will have similarly bad negative effects that we just don't anticipate as well. I would say generally speaking it's good, but you know.
Well, that's why I mentioned the X risks thing. I thought Micah would be up in that because there's a lot of overlap between neoliberals and effective altruists who care a lot about stuff like, well, maybe AI will kill us all, or maybe biological tech will kill us all. I'm of the view, as are like some positive effective altruist types, that more scientific advancement increases the risk of an existential killing event or whatever, but also increases the ability to resist those events, like better gene sequencing technology, better gene. I'm totally forgetting the technology underlying CRISPR, but that also makes it easier to make vaccines for a species-killing like disease. So
no, that's precisely my view. I mean, I consider myself an effective altruist. I do stuff with the local effective altruist club in the city of Houston, and like, yes, it is true that we will not have world-destroying AI if there's not AI that's very advanced. But also, we won't have like world-saving things from AI if AI is not very advanced, right? And it seems like on balance, it's very improbable to me that future technological advancement will actually make our quality of life worse whenever it seems like in so many ways it can make our life radically better.
Essentially what we're saying is technological and scientific advancement can present new problems, but it's probably unlikely that it's just like literally net bad. And so that seems like we're all in the same camp, but we're all strongly agree that that's a good direction to go in. Next up, children should be educated in religious or traditional values.
Disagree.
I mean, strongly disagree from me. SDL, you know.
I mean, strongly agree because, as we discussed earlier, the religious and traditional values of the United States are freedom and liberty and democracy. And so we raise them every day, praying to the church of democracy, saying, please, sir, just one more vote, please.
Don't you know, it all comes from the 10 Commandments. Every good thing that comes from the 10 Commandments.
Strongly disagree.
We're a strong disagree on that one. Next up, traditions are of no value on their own.
I strongly agree, yeah.
I would certainly strongly agree with this myself. STL, we're a strong agree across the board. Religion should play a role in government.
No.
Strong disagree from myself. SDL.
Big fan of secularism, not a big fan of the Pope.
Yeah, insofar as somebody's like for instance, if you're I don't know, like if part of your foundational philosophy is a Christian ideology that says that, you know, you should love your neighbor and, you know, you shouldn't judge people, this kind of thing. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a difference between saying you shouldn't judge people who are different from you and saying you need to read the Bible in order to understand that you shouldn't judge people who are different from you. These are very different statements and very different ways to govern, let's say. So, all right, let's. So it sounds like we're a strong disagree across the board. Next up, churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed.
Strongly agree. I mean, it's like they should still pay the land value tax. If they sell stuff, they should pay sales tax. But they're going to be a nonprofit, so they're not going to pay any sort of like corporate income tax or anything because they don't have profits, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I think a lot of people have challenged the idea of certain churches' nonprofit status because certainly, like, I mean, it seems like there are pastors that just get rich from their church, right? Yeah, God. I mean, local Houston legend Joel Osteen, who's like literally a multimillionaire from his church, basically.
I think it's from selling books a lot as well, though, and speaking fees. Like, I don't know. Like, I just imagine that's the case.
Like on the you're saying on the entity level.
Look into how much Lakewood pays him because it is possible that it just pays a ridiculous amount.
Well, and it's possible that he got jump started on that because he has like a mega church, right? So it's hard to be like, oh, well, he'd be able to sell those books if he didn't have the mega church. I just think it's easier because of the tax exemptions.
It's the entity level, right? Because again, like he's going to pay an income tax, but like for instance, a lot of mega pastors, they'll get in trouble because like the church will pay for their private jet. The church will pay for the residence that they live in, right? And so it's like, well, is this a basically tax avoidance, personal enrichment scheme? And yeah, anyway, well, that's interesting. But anyway, it sounds like we're all a strong agree, though, on this, despite potential rationale as to why churches should be taxed like anyone else. So next up, climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. Strongly agree. Immediate. Off the bat.
I would put strongly
agree, although I'd say like I don't think it is the strongest, but I think it is strong.
Yeah, I put strongly agree, not because it is the strongest, but it is like of the list of things that could fuck up how well humans are doing on Earth, it's like top 10.
It says easily. One of the greatest, yeah. So certainly it makes the list. It makes the Watch Mojo strongest, most apocalyptic things that might come around list there. Next up, it is more important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. Strongly agree, obviously.
Oh,
guys.
absolutely.
Come on.
Yeah, after we abolish the nation state, we can deal with this pesky climate change
Global carbon tax win.
All right. We all strongly agree on that one. Society was better many years ago than it is now. Strongly disagree.
I mean, if you're
strongest
racist,
terms.
if you're sexist, if you like being poor,
that's fair. As white men on this podcast, is society truly better today for us than it was years ago? We've lost
not
our
allowed
institutional
to
strength.
just sexually assault people anymore. This is genuinely awful.
Terrible society we've created. The woke amongst us, unbelievable.
Look, I'm just sorry that you capitalists aren't based in medieval pilled. Okay, I could be getting my 150 days of paid church vacation every single day.
Sure.
I could get my festival every other weekend.
You'd only pay tithe just 10% of income. Not
cheap.
Not all 50%.
And there wasn't even a Federal Reserve, right? My money was worth the same each year. Sounds like utopia.
All right. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past.
No.
So I would put strongly disagree. It's probably bad to have traditions like disappear if people don't want them to, but
look,
let it go.
Look, continuing something because it's a tradition, I think of it like brand equity, right? It's like I buy something because it's a popular brand, not because it's of high quality. And traditions are very similar. Like, if a tradition is good, it should be because the tradition's good, not just because it's a tradition, right? So, obviously, that's why I would strongly disagree with this. And it sounds like we're a strong disagree across the board. Next up, it is important that
I do have a small note. Naljawin, I think, raised the point in chat. Maybe you might prefer to live in like 2019, right before the pandemic. That might have been slightly economically better for some people.
True. It is important that we think in the long term beyond our own lifespans.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, certainly I would agree. We should think a little bit
Strongly agree.
More generationally.
People in the future matter too.
Yeah, future people do have value, it turns out. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture.
Strongly
agree, but it's also just one of those meaningless questions.
r/atheism wrote this question themselves.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's just like, who's the person who's like, you know what? No, actually, I don't care about logic. My traditions are more important.
But this is also just such a silly question. Like, I'm sorry. Let me consider two cultural institutions in the United States, like Turkey Day, Thanksgiving, and Tree Day, Christmas. Which one is more rational? Which one is more reasonable? It doesn't even make sense to say. Like, it's
obviously Turkey Day, dumbass. Jesus.
These are things that you
could have a cultural
subject to reason.
I guess you could have a cultural practice that is just irrational.
And I think that's probably. Oh, Mike is muted.
He was cutting out a little bit, but we heard his question. I would agree. I mean, I answered this question the same thing as the question we just answered, which is that, I mean, obviously, I don't know. I mean, like, for instance, if you have, playing football is a well, I don't want to use football because obviously the CT, I don't know, like having high school kids do wrestling, right, and being on a wrestling team, like, is it like, I don't know, a perfectly rational thing, like learning how to take someone down and hold them down, and like, you do the same thing and you get beat up all the time. Like, I don't know, is this a rational thing to do? Like, not really, but obviously it's a part of our culture and tradition, and it's a fun activity to do. So, I mean, it's not fun. The biggest deal.
Yes, it's fun. That's the reason. That's the reason why we do it. It's fun.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just injecting some nuance. I agree. I strongly agree with this, I would say. But I guess depending on how you interpret it, it's like it could make it sound like, I don't know, unless you could ground out mathematically the reason you do any particular cultural activity, like the dress that you wear, it's like, I don't think people think like this, but I would strongly agree with this myself. It sounds like we would all strongly agree. Next up, drug use should be legalized or decriminalized.
Strong agree.
I mean, strong agree. I don't think anybody should go to jail for using drugs. So legalization is a different question.
It should. Well, I guess I'll say agree, because I don't think it should be legalized, and like, I don't think most drugs should be legalized, but I do think they should all be decriminalized.
Sure. Well, I guess it says either or, so I would say strongly agree myself, because it's a component would be strongly agree. So we'll go strongly agree across the board on this one. Next up, same-sex marriage should be legal. I mean, strong agree, obviously. Come on. Who cares if you're gay?
You know, I'm not even good about there. Back in like 2012, when I was doing high school speech and debate, I remember people coming up with the craziest arguments against this to like, well, if we legalize it, that will normalize heteronormative relationships between couples. And now instead of having a radical polycule, you've been converted into white picket fence, boring homosexuals. So clearly a strong disagree. Can't let those gays
the policy debate environment is the tip of the sphere in terms of like people think woke is a thing. You go into a policy debate environment and your mind will be blown. It'll be an LSD like experience. The arguments that you hear in such an environment. It's really fun, honestly. I mean, if you think of it as just playing a fun game, I had a lot of fun doing it myself. But
look, it's some of the best intellectual masturbation you're going to get out there.
100%. That's a great way to put it. All right, no cultures are superior to others. This will be an interesting one. How do we feel about this one?
Well, it's like, okay, I disagree because like so if we consider a culture a collection of practices and social norms, there's clearly cultures that have worse practices and social norms, right? So let's think about the famous example of foot binding. That was a bad cultural norm, right? And so you could have cultures that just have tons of bad ones. And like you could have other cultures which are like have social norms of, I don't know, like looking after other people's kids whenever you randomly find a kid like in the street and being nice to people and smiling back at folks and giving them food and being hospitable, right? So I would say there are some inferior cultures.
Well, right. I mean, I would say even comparing on a time scale, like American culture today is better than American culture 50, 60 years ago, right? I mean, we used to be, presumably, depending on who you ask, obviously, we used to be far inferior in terms of my personal cultural preference. You know, we used to be very much more racist and homophobic and things like this, and obviously we've made what I would call some moral cultural progress. And so, of course, it's the case that not every single culture is completely equal in terms of its value. I have a value set insofar as my value set isn't just some like ultimate nihilism or something. I mean, of course, I would say that there are some cultural values that are better than others. So I would say a soft disagree to this one. SCL, what do you think?
I would do a soft disagree for the same reasons outlined. I think cultures really are sets of practices. I will just say that for a lot of practices, there are ways that we care. Like they're just objectively better, we might say. Like treating kids well, not beating like your intimate partner, stuff like that. That certain cultures prioritize and certain cultures don't. And like Econoboy said, ours has moved in a positive way in a lot of those. At the same time, I just wanted to mention again, like, we talked about how there are cultural practices that are like not rational. Like, is it bad that our culture wears T-shirts? It probably just doesn't really matter. So I would put like soft disagree because I feel like a lot of times people moralize everything about a culture. It is such a huge thing in conservative mills, like content mills, just to blame everything that's bad about XYZ group of people on their culture, which is just a boogeyman. It just doesn't mean anything. So.
I would say though, wearing T-shirts is objectively a good aspect of your culture, and if your culture requires people to dress up in uncomfortable clothes that you have to take to the laundromat 24/7, then it's bad. It's a bad culture. You're objectively inferior. Thank you.
Unbelievable. All right, sex outside of marriage is immoral. Obviously, I mean, I would strongly disagree. What do you guys think?
It is the most moral thing you can do.
True.
You have the categorical imperative.
Pro-natalist Micah says, do it often.
There we go. All right, strong disagree. Obviously, I mean, we don't, secular podcast, I suppose. So, if we accept migrants at all, it is important that they assimilate into our culture.
Yeah, I like. So clearly, people assimilating is like good. I don't like the at all part. It's like we should accept many migrants. And it would be cool and valuable for them to assimilate so they're culturally integrated, right? But I'll say disagree.
Yeah, like depending on the thing that we're talking about in terms of assimilation, like, I don't know, respect for democracy, I think is fairly important. But stuff like, again, we're talking about, there's all these irrational nonsense things that we associate with culture. Like, I don't know.
You need to like football. You need to like it.
Yeah.
Well, integrated.
I would say
And the weird thing is that modern American culture is so much a product of people who came and didn't assimilate. Like so many of the weird quirks we have are because Germans like refused to get rid of their shitty German ideals, and now they're great and we love them. And it's American. It's just Americana. Like I don't know.
I'll say neutral on this myself, just because the implications of this question could be quite negative. I would just say, like, from an interpersonal perspective, like, if I was an immigrant, there are certain things about cultural adoption that I feel like I would prioritize. Like, for instance, my father-in-law, when he came to this country from Pakistan, he was like, I just thought for myself it was important to learn English because it just made my whole life way easier being able to speak English. Now, I'm not saying that if you don't speak English, you shouldn't be able to come to this country. Like, that's because he and his family couldn't speak English, right? He had to learn it during, his work here. But interpersonally, though, I would say, of course, it's the case that there are certain things that you should probably try to adopt, in your household if you want to just make your life easier. But to what degree should that translate into government policy? Very hard to say, right? So I'll say neutral. For the podcast-wide answer, I'll go soft disagree for myself. But next question, last 10 questions. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases.
Strong disagree.
I will say strong disagree on that one as well, yeah. We'll go strong disagree for the podcast-wide answer. Next up, gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason.
Strong agree.
Disagree.
Micah says disagree.
I think that, I have a gun. Unlike some other maybe potentially soy people on this podcast. Do you have a gun, STL?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Not a real revolutionary socialist. Confirmed.
That's true. Number one reformist right here.
So it's like, why do I have a gun?
Oh, he's big anti-gun is cutting Micah's cord.
I like shooting, and that's fun, and I like having vintage firearms. It's a cool thing, and I don't think the government should just say, no, you need to prove to us that you have a good reason to buy a firearm. I think they need to prove that there's a good reason I shouldn't have a firearm, and I don't think we do either of those in our country. But I think that we should presume that people have the right to acquire firearms and take away that right only whenever there's a good reason to do so.
I would say this is a tough question for me to answer because I'm very strongly of the opinion that you should be prohibited from owning a gun without a certain licensing process, like without a certain licensing and tracking process, like in terms of registering purchases and proving that you have a competency to handle the weapon. But that doesn't mean that you need a valid reason to get those licenses, right?
You only have the right to drive if you prove there's a good reason.
Well, do you really need a license? Yeah, exactly, right. And so for that reason, I would say disagree as well for this, because I believe in very strong regulations regarding the ownership of guns, but like proving that you have a utility case for guns is probably not one of them.
My house is constantly being robbed. I need
yeah, like what does that mean? Like, anyway, so I would say disagree. STL says strongly agree. So I assume we're neutral
we could
on
have this
one.
conversation for ages, but I just do. Guns have a very strong negative effect on stuff like public safety and how people get killed. So
STL wants to take away everyone's guns. Unironically.
You know what's going to be so funny? STL is going to get the most libertarian square of us all. Meanwhile, he's like, ban guns, mandate education,
ban airplanes. That's my favorite one.
I'm just forcing people to be free. Is that such a hard thing to understand?
Next up, I support single-payer universal healthcare.
So I support universal healthcare, and I support what you could construe as Medicare for all, but you would still be able to opt out for private options. But I'd say it's closer to single payer certainly than what we have. So I'd say agree, but not strongly agree, because it's not an actual singular payer for all healthcare expenses.
I'm going to agree on this one. We're going to go agree for the podcast wide answer. Next up, prostitution should be illegal.
Strongly disagree.
I would also strongly disagree. Even if you're of the view that, because you can decriminalize prostitution in the sense that you can sell sex but not buy it, right? Like, there's just probably not a world where we want to be putting like sex workers in prison for being sex workers, right? And so in that regard, of course, prostitution should be legal, at least as a service to be offered. Whether or not it should be legal to buy prostitutes, the services of prostitutes.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if it's going to
question.
be legal, you need to like ban pimps and stuff like that. Actually, I think prostitution may be one of the areas in which, if it was to be legal, a co-op mandate or something like that may be actually most appropriate, just because of the inherent exploitive relations that emerge when you have like some external third-party owner. Such as a pimp.
I think Canada. I want to say in Canada, prostitution is legal, but brothels are illegal. Like, you cannot have organized prostitution, but if you want to sell sex and somebody wants to buy sex from you, then that's legal. I think a lot of countries regulate it this way for the reasons Micah just described. STL, what are your thoughts?
Just the ideal model is complicated, and the research on it isn't super clear. But when you actually talk to sex workers all the time, like, they want it decriminalized. It is not good, in fact, to be locked up for the work that you have to do to survive. So
there we go. Strong disagree.
Talking to sex workers all the time. That's interesting.
Strong disagree across the board. All right.
Number one supporter of the sex worker industry.
So true.
Next up, maintaining family values is essential.
If the family values are the values of egalitarian sharing of chores and building up trust in one another, then I love those family values.
If the family values are socializing the means of production, then SDL is 100%.
The family values of having a little framed poster of Mao on the wall. Yep, completely.
This is one where
I'm assuming
what do
it's
you
just
mean?
Like the nuclear family. I'm assuming that's like what it's all about.
Yeah, this is clearly it's meant to be a conservative signal about family values, which is, again, the frustration is that if you just defined it like, hey, maintaining traditional gender norms in the family, it was so clear. I hate these questions, man. Do strong disagree. Put that strong disagree down right now.
I'll do soft disagree as well. So soft disagree for the podcast.
Because I think families are a valuable social institution. I had to look in the empirics about like whether there's alternative models of like child upbringing and support that work better.
Children will be randomly assigned in SDL's ideal world. Okay.
Yes.
Scientists.
We are going to randomize the children. No economist has ever been so dedicated to causal evidence.
Yeah.
All
right.
State agents.
Next up, to chase progress at all costs is dangerous.
Strongly disagree. I like progress. Progress is good by definition.
At all costs, though, Micah?
I'm going to put strongly disagree because I hate adding the phrase "at all costs" here. Because by definition, if it's at all costs, then it has to be strongly agree. Because would I pursue progress if it meant aliens would come down and like destroy the planet? Well, no, but that's like a worthless question. So strong disagree. Progress.
That wouldn't be progress.
Oh my God! Either way, it's tautological.
The internal logic is problematic, according to Micah.
No, actually, no. You could be a deontologist, and you could be like, I don't care about the consequences of all this progress. It's breaking the moral laws, don't you know? So, like, as long as you're a consequentialist and you define progress as in making things better, we should.
But then that's a tautology, right? It's literally just, is progress good? Where we define progress to be good. It's like, well, yes. So I hate this question.
Are you a consequentialist? That's basically the question.
Oh my God.
We strongly disagree across the board here.
That's why the question sucks. I'm so mad about it.
All right, next question.
I'm freaking out. This question.
Next question. This is an extremely controversial question if you ask a random American, but the question is: genetic modification is a force for good, even on humans.
Strongly agree. Yeah, of course. Like, should we edit out the diabetes genes so that I never got diabetes, type 1 diabetes, and my children?
Should we edit out dark skin as well, Micah? He falls silent. Take note, audience. He falls silent on that.
Well, so I do think it is worth noting that there is a bad history with eugenics.
I mean, that's essentially the opposition, right? Is like, oh, we're gonna edit out dark features, and we're gonna edit out like curly hair, and we all end up with this weird racialized Gattaca-like society.
Yeah, so there's obvious this could obviously be used for evil, but in my opinion, that's sort of true of all medical technology. We have the ability to just implant devices into people. We could just put a tracking device into everyone. Does that mean that surgery is bad? Well, no, because we don't actually use it like that.
Yeah.
If you had a society where people are either voluntarily changing their own genes, and it's questionable to what degree parents should have control of their kids' genes, but like for things which are obvious negatives, very few people have much of an opposition to stuff like this. It's where you get the things like intelligence. It turns out that actually, just brief aside, intelligence is one of those things where there really aren't many genes for intelligence. And thinking that you're giving your kid all the right genes for intelligence mostly means you're giving them random genes associated with high status in American society. So you're just making them into like a Jewish or an Indian person, basically. Like,
I mean, like, well, clearly there are some like genetic attributes related to intelligence, right? Like brain size.
Well, yes and no, because the thing, brain size doesn't actually correlate when you divide by body size. Like there's all these things where you think you figured it out, and then it turns out you do a better study, and no, absolutely didn't. And
Micah's kids are gonna come out looking like Jimmy Neutron, just the most giganticest genetically modified brain possible.
Like,
and the easiest proof of this, Micah, is, are women bigger brained than men? No, but are they dumber than men? No, like same IQ, despite a substantial difference in brain size. So literally, there these things where people think I figured out intelligence, and it's like, no, actually, like it's so just to give you an idea, humans have Micah's muted, so I can speak over him. Humans have 20,000 genes, and we think that some 10,000 of them are implicated in intelligence. There are very few genes, other than ones which cause like brain damage, which are associated with intelligence, with an obvious
very
reason why.
I would say, so for that reason, I would strongly agree. I do trust democratic apparatuses to basically regulate, like, hey, for social purposes, you can't pick the gender because we don't want to have this crazy gender skew in society. We're not gonna allow people to pick, like, racial elements or things like that. Like that would probably, like, cosmetic features, basically. But yeah, I mean, the idea that you can predispose your kid to not dying of heart disease, I don't know. That just sounds pretty reasonable to me. Or for instance, predispose your kid to being more athletic and healthier generally is probably fine. Yeah, we can hear you, Micah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, and
okay, think I have no idea what that was about.
Yeah, and so for those reasons, I would say that's good. I'll address one last argument in this regard. So some disability rights organizations will make the claim that this is like genocide. This is eugenics because by getting rid of deafness or getting rid of Down syndrome or getting rid of X disability from the gene pool, you are necessarily leading to the elimination of the community that exists for such people, and the community that I, as a deaf person, for example, I'm not saying I'm a deaf person, just as an example, I'm a part of this community because I'm deaf, and you're eliminating and destroying my community because you're eliminating deafness.
You could always make yourself deaf. Like just go get an operation.
That's quite a response.
Disable yourself, right?
Well, no, but I'm just pointing. That is
just
legitimately,
dog.
Well, no, but that is legitimately that is an argument.
It is actually a real problem that has occurred, that with like the development of cochlear implant technology, that deaf communities have started to collapse. And so a lot of the social networks that lifted people up and helped them maintain their lives, like, started to dissipate and fall apart. So like, Mike is being a little bit diminutive, and I'm just trying to say, like, there are actually real impacts of like having
there's community loss. Yeah. I mean, this is something to think about. And it's just to say that, again, we have to understand that if the good part about being part of a deaf community is the community part, then the problem isn't getting rid of deafness. It's just, generally speaking, the lack of solidarity and community that you might experience, right? But it's not good to be deaf. It's not good to be
if somebody tells
disabled.
me, Mike, that we should not cure type 1 diabetes because I want there to be type 1 diabetic camps in the future, so like millions of kids have to have type 1 diabetes, I'm going to call them an absolute idiot. Like that's completely insane and very much immoral not to cure it. Now, just relating to... Wait, one sec. I was muted earlier, so I didn't get to say anything. What I want to say is, I don't think parents should have any discretion over what your genes are. Like, they should not be able to say, "Oh, I want my kid to be like a little bit taller," like build a child. I think that automatically, like, medical professionals that are related to they should be very involved in providing family planning services for people, and especially when they're pregnant. They should have like the mandate that if they detect that you have like a serious gene that will generate like a serious deformity that's like within a list of different deformities and diseases, they have to intervene to fix it. It's like they're required to.
So this is something that I've discussed before. One of the simple ways to get around concerns of eugenics and discrimination and even elimination of stuff like deaf communities is to simply have a requirement that people with whatever gene have a democratic vote. And if a sufficient portion of them say, hey, this gene, I would be willing to have it like be eliminated from all people forever, maybe you do that sort of democratic mandate. Because otherwise there's a risk that like some gene, which isn't that bad, could be eliminated. Like, I think that you need some kind of check like this. You need to be...
But like...
Absolutely.
Like it's...
I don't know. I mean, well, we don't need to belabor the point too much because we all are strongly agree in this regard, just for somewhat abstract reasons. But the counter arguments, it is important to talk about those counter arguments because the reason I opened up by saying this is a controversial question, I think like 10% of people agree with that proposition, the idea that genetic modification on humans is good. It's actually an incredibly controversial question.
The general populace is bad at decision making.
We need to get rid of the gene that causes them to be against gene editing.
I think people in general are just very anti like transhumanist. People have a real tie to our bodies. Something. Okay, so I've just been thinking about this a lot because I've been watching a lot of sci-fi media.
Like cloning humans, very controversial.
It's striking how much people are like, oh my god, cloning is so crazy. We clone people in like biological vats every day. They're called women, and they work great. And it's cool. Like I don't. It's like a really crass way to put it, but like we've been doing all these crazy gene editing things on crops for hundreds of thousands of years. Like I think people
we
want
clone
to imagine,
animals. Yeah.
People want to imagine there's this nice clean division between what is natural and what is unnatural, and it just does not exist. And so like I think people should just embrace that. They should be like, yep, there is no clean division. I should want to order things in a way
does a cloned human have a soul though, SDL? Are we playing God by creating humans that are man-made? That's a philosophical
there is a real question of like how much biological material you could replace with what material we consider to not have the property of being conscious, like before consciousness is eliminated. That's a big question in philosophy of the mind. Like, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for something to be conscious? What is the nature of consciousness? At
what point does your nanobot-filled cellular structure lose its consciousness? Interesting philosophical question, but a question for another day. The next question, we strongly agree across the board on that one. Next question, we should open our borders to immigration.
Strongly agree.
Strong agree.
Yeah, I don't take this question.
Give me the super strong agree, okay? Whenever you're doing the weighting on this vote, give me an extra 2 points. Pull it up there.
I don't take this question to say that we should have open borders, but rather just that we should have basically immigrants that can come through the border in some amount. So of course, I strongly agree with that. Next question. Government should be as concerned about foreigners as they are about their own citizens.
I mean, like philosophically speaking, all people are equal, and that means they all deserve equal moral consideration. But it's just not practical for governments to care as much about people across the world as they do for their own citizens.
Okay, but we get an exception on this one because we've already voted for the world government. So the world government now applies to all people. So it's totally fine. There, in fact, are no foreigners.
In this case, there
are no foreigners. So therefore, it's okay to be totally nativist. We only care about the citizens. Having reduced the population of foreigners to 0, it's totally okay to be nativist.
Yeah, now you only have to
I guess we should.
Aliens.
We should probably go back to the immigration question. Put strongly disagree because we just think there shouldn't. It would be just one border, right?
Yeah, on this one, I would soft agree. I mean, I think that, or rather, I think it'd be fair to say that when proposing a government policy, you should always think to yourself how this might affect international populations, obviously,
sure.
and so to the extent that I feel like this question's almost asking like if there was a policy that was really really good for a domestic population but really bad for a foreign population. Should you do it? My answer would be no to such a question. Should
you do it imperialism? And the answer is probably no.
Should you do bad things? No, but it's just like in general, you should probably think about your own population and their interests and their needs more than foreign population. Like,
I'm a soft agree.
The generalized utilitarian answer is that you should care about your actions insofar as you're able to control them, and you are more able to affect like your population than other populations for the vast majority of things the government can do. So like, yes, you should be more focused on your citizens just because you don't control otherwhere. So like, I don't
Well,
know.
also just imagine Medicare for all Vietnamese people, right? Like we have a Medicare for all program, but not for any Americans. For
Well,
people in other countries.
I mean, they're actually okay. I know you joke. There actually have been like reparations for imperialism programs suggested like that, where like the state, the North should just pay for healthcare all across like colonized lands. Which I don't know, it's an interesting proposal, right? It would increase the government revenues for a huge portion of people, but whatever.
Yeah.
Neither here nor
All
there.
right. Well, I guess on this question, I'm a soft agree. Micah, sounds like you're a soft agree as well. And SDL, you might be a strong agree, or where do you shake down on this question?
Just put agree. I don't like the construction of this question.
Strong
I don't
agree
like this
or
test.
soft
You
agree
could write a
across
much
the
better
board.
test.
Micah, you literally suggested 8 values test, good sir. All right, this was
Because it's
your
much
direct.
better than political compass, and the other, like most of these tests are bad.
All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. I mean, strong agree, obviously.
I disagree.
True.
I love sexism, actually. Thank you.
Whoa, sex wasn't mentioned here. It was sexuality. Now, I do have to strongly disagree because we know about the gays, right? I mean, it's a problem. I mean, come on, ridiculous.
True. All right, next question. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. My group. My group.
No,
what does this mean?
Other groups' goals over mine.
See, this is a funny question because if you define my group as, have you seen the studies on the moral universe of liberals versus conservatives? Like where they put moral weight. So there's a really neat graph that conservatives tend to center moral weight closer to themselves, as in like their family has more importance, their tribe or their nation has more importance, their children have more importance, but they put less and less and less on like the country, the world, all living beings, like all life everywhere, aliens, stuff like that. Whereas liberals tend to be on the universalist side. Like liberals will value the universe and all life over their children type thing. So simply, if I define my group as, all living beings and all consciousness and sentience and life everywhere, I think my group is great. I love that group. Big fan.
Yeah, this is a question incredibly open to interpretation. I guess from my perspective, I would say, well, insofar as my group is people who think the things that I think, well, then I suppose the answer would necessarily be.
Here's the thing you need to keep in mind. This is a nationalism question versus internationalism.
If they just put this as my country, it would be so different.
Yeah, so I guess
disagree because I'm super globalist, so I don't want to increase my nationalism.
Yeah, I would say disagree as well. It's a very weird question, but insofar as the interaction of the test is understood, I would say disagree as well. SDL, what do you come to?
Let's call it disagree and let's end her.
All right, what do we end up with? We end up as a libertarian socialist podcast. It turns out.
Oh no!
Unsurprisingly.
Yes!
We end up with 60, and it turns out my tests I'm the moral center because my percentages are so incredibly similar to the aggregate tests. So we've discovered what we've always
look
known.
At mine.
Okay, so can you just here real quick in the chat? Can each of you post your individual one and a Convoy the general one, and I can put them all together real quick. You just post them somewhere, and I'll put them together. Is what I'm saying.
I'll take a screen grab of mine and throw them in the brain trust chat.
Don't take a screen grab. Down at the bottom, there's like a one that has a nice little border, and it's a fixed size. Do that one.
Yeah, save the PNG, and then so we could have.
So sorry.
I got done? Democracy, and I 60% equality, roughly 58.3%, which is a little bit remarkable. I think this test definitely skews left. Very progressive.
Yeah, it turns out it turns out, surprisingly enough, it turns out that this podcast is quite a progressive space, which I'm surprised to find out.
Well, on three axes, I mean, on two axes, we all basically completely agree, right? Like the diplomatic axis and the societal axis, we're very culturally progressive and very internationalist / globalist. On the civil axis, we tend to sort of agree, but like SDL, I feel like you're just way more authoritarian, like on these very random niche issues, like just very niche authoritarianism.
Well, SDL wants to take your guns away and force you into education, but he gets 85% libertarian. Unbelievable.
A while ago, I did actually want to try and make a better version of this test using only questions from Pew, because one of the other big problems with this test that we didn't explicitly discuss, all the questions are weighted equally. So if you said like, I don't have examples on hand, but it would be something like, I don't know. Do you think that your group should be put ahead of other groups, and you put strongly agree? And if you put something like my country is better than all other countries, and you put strongly disagree, that nets out to 0. But those questions aren't actually like equal in weight, and they shouldn't be. So I don't know. It's sort of ridiculous that
we need to develop the Three Wonks political alignment test, and
that actually add that to the to-dos.
Have you ever heard of adversarial? Oh, what the fuck is it? It's adversarial cooperation in science.
I have not. I can't say I have.
I might be mangling the name, but it's this idea where two people who fucking hate like the opposition's research idea, but are willing to work together as partners, devise a test that could prove one true or false. Is sort of the epitome of how it's supposed to work out. So you get one guy who thinks minimum wage raises employment, and one guy who thinks it lowers it or whatever, and they work out, here's how we're going to design a test that actually checks it. I feel like that could be a really interesting thing. What would the political test be if you had to design it by a council of like 10 people of different politics? Would be a very interesting thing.
There we go. All right, where's the graphic, SDL? Just to quickly compare our 3 different test results.
Did you post,
I did. I posted it.
Is that yours or is the general one?
That's the general one.
Do you want to post yours?
No, I'm sorry. That's mine. I'm sorry. Yes, that's my test that I posted, not the podcast-wide test.
One sec.
Yeah, you should put Econo Boys in the middle on your like Canva thing, whatever.
Canva.
And then you have to be on the left, SDL. Obviously.
I was going to make it a square because these are squares, okay?
Are you putting all 4?
Well, that's the thing. He didn't send the 4th one, so I can't make it a square. So now I have to make it a rectangle, like y'all said.
Oh,
this is disgusting.
You want me to send the
yeah, I mean, they've already seen our joint one. I think
they're looking at it.
3.
Guys,
yeah, I think they should see our 3 together.
All right, one sec.
But like, yeah, this test. I mean, I
we literally
58.3% equality, so just 10 percentage points less than the average.
All right, 1 minute. Here you go, Econo Boy.
All right, let's see all these individual results.
Did I label these correctly, or did I put Micah's in the wrong one? One sec.
Yeah, I'm definitely not libertarian socialism. That's not me.
Yeah, you messed up, SDL. It's okay.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm the middle actually. Good job.
It's okay.
Give me 1 second.
He'll fix this quickly.
Oh my god.
His job's on the line here, guys. Don't worry. He's nervous.
My big payout of $13 is on the line.
That's true. Our $15 a month.
These results are truly extraordinary.
All right, Micah EB 2400.
Hacking the mainframe.
I am hacking the mainframe right now. I'm on 16 values right now. You have no idea how advanced this image is.
It's funny, like SCL is just more extreme in every respect.
I mean,
I check the chat.
Socialist, yeah. I guess, right? So, all right, let me pull this up for the people at home. Here we go, guys. Let me turn the chat off.
EB, you're a little bit more nationalist than both of us, so that's a little bit unfortunate.
I guess so. I mean, what can I say? I guess I'm just a shill for the military-industrial complex, you know?
Not that much. I mean, it's basically identical for EB and Micah, and then I'm like 10 points above.
I'm 1.1 percentage points
That's
more.
Not okay, you know what? That was the other thing I wanted to include. Because I would have like variances from the Pew surveys, you could add an error term to each one, and then you could be like, is my result statistically significant? You have to, where are the normal curves on these?
You see, it's
for the confidence intervals.
I mean, basically on all these things, you can see the ideology. You see, as you go from SDL to Micah, you get less and less socialism. You get less internationalism. I mean, essentially speaking, you get less libertarianism, and you get less revolutionaryism, whatever you'd call it. So, we've accurately pegged our collective and individual ideologies on this podcast, guys. So that's the big takeaway here from this test. And we got to answer a bunch of interesting questions, I suppose. But let's move on to the next topic. Any last thoughts, STL? It sounded like you had some.
I just did want to say, if we are actually interested in doing this test, it's very easy using this GitHub. Like tons of people have made edits of this because you can just change the text of each question. You can just change the value of each question. Like you can add axes. It's not too hard to do. So
I know tons of people have made these tests. I think that we actually should make one.
Oh my God.
It'd be a good marketing device as well because our test would be way better than this one.
Our test would be way better. I agree.
Wonk values. Wait, wonk values.
Oh my
There you go.
God.
All right, next up.
Land value tax, Georgism access. This is the best thing ever. We should absolutely do this.
All right, next up we have. This should be the last hour of the show. Basically, we have one last thing that we wanted to talk about. Again, we started the show out by talking about this topic. The worst non-housing regulations. So I have some parameters that I've discussed with the people on this show, Micah and SDL, before. And so let's talk about some of the rules. So what is the single worst non-housing regulation that the hosts would remove nationwide? So that's like sort of fundamentally the question. And then we've got the rules. So obviously it cannot relate to housing in any direct or obviously indirect way. It has to be a single rule or regulation, which is to say that you can't just say we're going to repeal an entire bill, right? But rather there's a line item or perhaps a title from a single bill that you would get rid of. You cannot reduce and moderate a rule. So for instance, it has to be a complete removal, and it must be removed in the entire nation. Next up, we cannot assume that any regulation comes after to replace the bad regulation. So once the regulation is removed, it's just gone. We can't really count on something coming back to replace it. So for instance, you couldn't say, get rid of the income tax, but replace it with a consumed income tax. No. We're just isolating the impact of getting rid of something, not a package of results afterwards. And we will also split this into two sections. So we'll have the worst economic regulation or rule that doesn't have to do with housing. And then we're going to have the worst non-economic, as to the extent that we can imagine a non-economic regulation, social regulations, whatever it might be. So those are the two different regulations we're each going to give. So why don't we start out with SDL? SDL, the worst regulation of the economy, according to a socialist, what is it?
So I wasn't sure what to pick here. I know Micah includes some stuff about the Supreme Court, which I thought was probably off limits. So I was looking at stuff that has been congressional acts, and I would probably point to the Taft-Hartley Act. I don't know.
You see, really quick, SDL, not to interrupt you, it shows how closely our audience is listening to this to this podcast. Guys, I just said we can't say a whole bill gets removed. Now, immediately we've got Najuan and Lithex in the chat. Just repeal the Jones Act. Guys, it has to be a single line of regulation, not a whole bill.
That was my exact response as well. I was like, yeah, just repeal the Jones Act. And then he was like, no, you can't do that.
No. We've got to get more granular. Okay, guys, we got to get more granular. STL, go on.
Because of that granularity, I was like, well, I can't do the Taft-Hartley Act. And it's also not clear. There's some provisions which are pro-union that I'm not sure I'd want to get rid of. So of those, I thought one of the most interesting ones, and one which might have most in agreement by liberals, is to legalize solidarity strikes. There's a line in the Taft-Hartley Act which makes it illegal for one union to strike in solidarity with another union strike somewhere. And I'm of the belief that this is not only a violation of labor rights. You should just have the ability to strike, period. This is actually a violation of your First Amendment rights. Like, if I want to do a capital strike, if I'm a business owner and I think this guy's business sucks and he's a bad person, I can just stop selling to him. I can tell my friends to stop selling to him. That's a capital strike. Capital strikes happen all the time. And yet, for some reason, if labor wants to do the same thing, it's not allowed. So I think this is basically ridiculous on both a liberal, pro-free speech ground and just on the grounds that it enormously reduces the ability of labor to coordinate strikes. It means that an already existing union cannot support a potential union by striking in opposition to an unfair labor practice. if a union is cutting down, it's union busting, it's like spreading propaganda, trying to just totally destroy the ability of a fair election in that firm, then another union can't be like, hey, we're going to strike and not help do any business with that business. So I'm of the belief it's a violation of human rights and labor rights.
I have a correction. Apparently, Najuan and Lithex said repeal the Jones Act before they heard the full list of rules. So
it shows how closely
I'm watching the chat. Exactly, a poor reflection on my own character, unfortunately. But apologies to Najuan and Lithex in the chat. If that is indeed true, I'll go back and watch this afterwards. And if it's not true, banned for life, Najuan and Lithex. Okay, no,
live replay.
But STL, I mean, I guess like to challenge that to some degree, like, what do you? Okay, so for instance, we get rid of a prohibition on solidaristic strikes or secondary strikes, whatever you'd call it. I mean, do you think this would actually have a big effect on union formation in this country? Like, would it be better to, I don't know, get rid of right to work or something? I don't know.
Well, but right to work isn't a federal law, so I was like, I can't do that. I don't think, because there's not one law I can get rid of and suddenly right to work is legal, right? If I could.
It's important to note that when me and Econoboy talked about this before the episode, because we did some planning, he did say that interpretations of laws, like Supreme Court cases, are eligible for consideration. Yeah, maybe if you did a little bit more homework on what the rules were here, SDL, you wouldn't be in this position.
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to point out, though. Just to the question, like, what do you imagine the impact of legalizing secondary strikes would really be on union formation, right?
Did you follow the UAW's stand-up strike recently against the auto workers? The auto worker strike against the automakers.
I don't. I know I didn't. I don't know.
So they did this tactic called a stand-up strike, in which they would only strike at one plant, which was key to the logistics of the whole thing. So let's say it's a car, and the car needs a battery to function. Well, guess what? The battery installation plant is no longer installing any batteries. And that means that every other factory is worthless, but the people there are still showing up to work. It's just that they don't have any work to actually do. So that means you're still paying them wages for zero profit. So one of the guys who's like the biggest lobbyist for the car industry called this a gun to the head of the automakers. The reason I'm mentioning all this is you can easily imagine that applied to solidarity strikes. Just point that gun at another firm.
Sure. So instead of focusing on sort of focal points of the production chain, rather just focus on different firms within the production changes as well.
So whereas right now you can do a solidarity strike inside of a vertically integrated firm, so like if it's got 3 stages, you could strike at stage 2. This is sort of saying, well, you can just strike at any stage for any reason in alignment with another firm. And I should mention, these won some of the biggest union pay raises, like period. And I think that it actually resulted in a 20% pay raise in non-unionized firms because they were so scared of having their firms unionized. So I can't prove this would have a big unionizing effect, but it seems to have been really, really effective and fairly cheap for the union because they only put like 4% of employees on strike. That's cheap as hell. So,
yeah. All right, I guess I'll go next on this one. So, my number one worst economic regulation. I really did think about this and try to consider, like, what really would be the worst single regulation that would exist in our society that we could get rid of. It's a bit of a controversial pick for such a progressive individual such as myself, but I will say, and I will confidently defend, the worst single economic regulation or statute that we have is the corporate tax. Now, I know what you're thinking, to the socialists and SOCDEMs in the chat. I know that you're thinking, oh my goodness, Econoboy, just another example of a social fascist, naturally, not a true progressive. He doesn't want these corporations paying any taxes. Now, number one, just to defend that this is a single statute, I will reference my screen currently. A tax is hereby imposed for each taxable year on taxable income of every corporation. This is part of 26 U.S. Code 11 tax imposed. We would get rid of this code and or just change the tax imposed to 0, so easily enough. Now, why do I say that this is literally the worst thing that we do in the economy if we're talking about a single line of regulation? It is because, number one, literally any study that you look at will tell you that some amount of corporate tax collected is just lower wages for workers. Now, I don't want workers to make lower wages, right? So to the extent that we can increase worker wages by getting rid of a bad regulation, we should. Number one. Number two, some amount of corporate taxes is paid by consumers in the form of prices. That's what, studies that attempt to answer what proportion of corporate taxes are paid by consumers, it's some amount above zero, right? Which is bad as well. I don't want consumers to pay higher prices than they otherwise pay. That's not good for lower income people. Number three, but Econoboy, a lot of that tax is paid by shareholders, right? I mean, perhaps a majority, perhaps 3/4 of that tax is paid by shareholders. My point is, you can just tax shareholders. There's no reason to tax corporate profits. To the extent that a corporation is funneling profits to shareholders, we have a tax on dividends. You can increase that tax. We have a tax on capital gains. You can increase that tax. Joe Biden implemented a tax on stock buybacks. If you think that's bad, we could increase the tax on stock buybacks. If you think the accumulated non-sold wealth of wealthy people is bad, you can just tax wealth, right? There's just no reason to have a corporate tax. Now, why is the corporate tax so bad? Not only because it makes consumer prices and it makes laborers paid less. Obviously, that's not, it makes prices higher and wages lower. But also because it leads to a shitload of unnecessary employment in our economy. I mean, think about it, guys. How many billions of dollars of revenue do business tax consultants make every year as an industry? A whole entire billion dollar industry, whole entire professions, whole entire careers of intelligent people dedicated to how can we avoid the business tax. Well, I mean, if it's not necessary, why do we need to create that in the first place? It doesn't seem purposeful, right? And so it just seems really, really bad in that regard. And then also there's some amount of potential investments that gets lost because of corporate taxation, all this kind of thing. So if your big concern is, well, we should tax wealthy people, and so that's why it's important to have a corporate tax. Well, there's just so many more direct taxes to do that are less distortionary anyway, and it doesn't lead to some tax consultant getting paid $500,000 a year to tell Exxon how to avoid taxes, right? It's just not really a great mechanism for our economy. That is why I say corporate tax is my number one worst economic regulation. Guys, what do you think?
So I'm actually not opposed to this if there were a replacement. However, under the rules of the game, I think that I would pretty strongly oppose just removing the corporate income tax. Either of one of two assumptions. One is that we don't replace it at all, and now the deficit's very large. And so Micah should be very mad about that because, big deficit hound Micah over here.
Hold on, counterpoint. All right, this is one thing that I forgot to mention to the audience, but if we look at my graph here, if we look at tax receipts on corporate income, so this is just like, what do we actually raise from the corporate tax? I mean, $400 billion a year, this is not a lot of money that we're even, I mean, think about it. We spend billions of dollars a year on business tax consultants, but we only raise like a few $100 billion a year from this tax. And here's another thing. The fact that distributions to shareholders would go up in this scenario, because again, prices come down, wages go up, but also distributions to shareholders go up, we're going to necessarily collect more capital gains tax revenue in this world because capital gains taxes are higher than corporate income taxes, right? So it's not the whole $400 billion that we're losing.
I agree. It's probably not the whole effect. And there might also be maybe some trickle down effects, like literally in the sense that, you can pay more to workers. But my point more broadly was just that I think that it probably would be bad to open up giant, this is still a fairly large hole in the deficit. I think the current deficit is like $800 billion. So even let's say it's a $200 billion hole, that's like a 25% increase. Right?
I think that the current deficit is a lot higher than $800 billion.
Am I outdated?
It's substantially north of $1 trillion.
Well, it doesn't matter. If it comes to not taxing corporations, all of a sudden SDL is a fiscal hawk. Can you believe it?
I agree with Econoboy. I agree that I don't know. I wouldn't obviously agree that it's the best possible thing that we could strike, but I definitely agree it'd be a good thing to strike. There is just simply so much waste and distortion that it causes, tons of deadweight loss. It's just a bad tax, and even if we had a deficit, spend more to get rid of it.
A progressive could run on this and run on the platform that every single business tax accountant and lawyer is unemployed the next day when we get rid of the corporate tax, and more unemployed tax avoidance lawyers is a good thing in my book, SDL.
So I like a lot of that. We have discussed previously that DBCFT or other alternatives, which would still be taxing corporations, would probably be much better. The second opposition I just wanted to offer was that let's imagine that we didn't deficit spend and instead we filled the gap with existing taxes. We just expand existing taxes. So you make payroll tax a little bigger, you make income tax a little bigger. The comparison is that corporate income tax, my understanding is that although it has a bunch of distortions, like you laid out, it's also a fairly progressive tax. And so the new tax burden might fall disproportionately on lower income people. Like insofar as we think a deficit is sort of a tax on future people, you're taxing like future lower income people at a significant amount. So that'd be the only concern I'd want to offer. I do generally agree that like corporate income tax as it exists is probably pretty distortionary.
I mean, this might be my most like Laffer curve type liberty, like a Reaganite argument. But I will say that, and maybe, Micah, maybe you have better data, or maybe you've looked into this more to back this up. Like I will say, it really would not surprise me if just getting rid of the corporate tax leads to so much more economic output and so much more shifting of taxation to other buckets where like higher labor incomes means higher labor taxes that are paid, and higher capital distributions means we're capturing a higher proportion of that as well with the capital gains tax. It literally wouldn't surprise me if just getting rid of the corporate tax in a medium term was just like strictly deficit neutral. Micah, I don't know if you have a better idea of that. But
it's totally possible. We just have to look at like the fiscal impact of mass profit reshoring, because instantly you'd see huge profit reshoring. And, you honestly might even see people using America as a tax haven. So like you would just see a crazy amount of capital inflow, which could trigger taxable occurrences. I imagine like obviously over the long run, it's going to be revenue negative, even whenever you count in the economic impacts. But it's like, well, $100 billion or $110 billion to the deficit, like, is it net negative? Of course, it's not net negative. It's certainly net positive still. So
there you go. Well, all right, that's my case. The corporate income tax, I think, is a surprisingly relevant candidate for thinking about like what is the worst single regulation we do for the economy that's not related to housing. Micah,
yeah,
what's the worst one in your view?
So I originally was thinking about striking Title I of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. Title I actually includes the entire piece of legislation. Everything in the National Environmental Policy Act is organized under a singular title, so that was quite convenient. That would have eliminated the requirement to do environmental review in the permitting process, which I think is very wasteful. But I think, honestly, since we're allowed to do Supreme Court rulings, just overturn a Supreme Court ruling, I would overturn Williamson v. Lee optical, or alternatively, whatever other Supreme Court case actually established this precedent. I'm not a lawyer. This is my understanding that Williamson versus Lee optical established occupational licensure as something that state governments could do. For those who don't know, for a lot of professions, you need to get a license before you can do them, right? If you want to be a barber, you need to get a license. You want to be a doctor, you need to get a license. You want to be a sumo wrestler and you're in the state of Florida, you might need a license, right? And so the problem with occupational licensing is it imposes tons of costs. It makes it harder for people to enter into industries where they might be productive. And it requires the people who do end up going into those industries to go through licensing procedures. And what we see is it increases inequality by locking out plenty of people from high-paying careers. It reduces economic output because it forces people to do jobs that are less productive. And it's all to increase safety, yet despite that claim, it does not seem clear from the empirical evidence that I've seen that it pretty much ever increases safety. Maybe in rare cases for people like doctors or attorneys, like there's a quality impact, but it is important to note that the alternative to occupational licensing is not no quality standards. It's independent, probably nonprofit associations having their own accreditation and their own procedure. And it would still basically be the discretion of individuals, whether they wanted to go to an attorney which was not privately licensed or not. So I think that this would striking that Supreme Court case would solve a lot of economic problems we have in terms of our labor supply shortage within several key areas.
Yeah, and just for the audience, I feel like it's fair to say that Supreme Court decisions are I would say up for this type of thing, just because Supreme Courts obviously shape how our understanding of regulation and our sort of practical effects of legislation and things actually get interpreted. So I think it's fair, like if the Supreme Court can say this line means this, I think it would be fair because every line that the Supreme Court interprets is like therefore sort of necessarily a new interpretation. I think it's fair for us to say, well, we should just get rid of that understanding and replace it with the previous understanding that we had, right? So, not unreasonable in my view. STL, last thoughts on this?
Just that, like it might be a net positive. I do have Micah has a lot more faith in caveat emptor, in buyer beware, and consumer ability to sort like good and bad doctors, and I have just a lot less faith in, and not just doctors, but a lot of stuff like that. So I would want to see a carve out for stuff like where it's plausible that markets don't work well, where you need high information, where there's a reasonable safety risk. So probably stuff like doctors. But I'm not actually sure where else.
So that's the thing, right? Like if we carved out those areas, you'd still see like the amount of people that like just 22% of jobs or something like that require occupational licensing. We've seen several states that went from 30% to 18% after they did reform, and you just like can't find any difference. And I think even for medical professionals, if you compare the performance of doctors versus nurse practitioners by looking at like what happens when you allow nurse practitioners to do more things, you don't see any sort of reduction in like safety or bad outcomes. So it just seems like these licensing procedures make us poorer and make people poorer and reduce opportunity.
One thing that I do wonder about that, and so I haven't delved into empirical literature at all, is we do have open borders within this country. And I do wonder to what degree having licensure in some states might raise the quality of all doctors across all states, because people can move to other states. And so like they might have gotten licensed here, but now they can practice freely over there.
Well, I think to the extent that you believe in minimum qualifications for performing certain duties, then I think that would still fall under Micah's worldview, because if I understand Micah the case, it's just saying that individual states can regulate licensure, whereas it seems like the federal government would still have the domain to
Actually, I think if you overturn this case, it would just say like this is not something government can do. It's unconstitutional because it's a question of constitutionality. Now, I would agree.
Wait, Micah. So
overrule says only state governments can.
Hold on, wait, Micah. So if we got rid of this, would that mean that like just anybody could say that they're a doctor and offer like medical care? Or, like how would
I could still have of like advertising yourself, like what you can call yourself, titles and labels. I think that we could not say you need a license to like perform a certain profession. I don't know if of like permits to drive, like
that's
driver's
a rough
license
one,
would
Micah.
be persuaded by that one. But that's my understanding. It would just eliminate all occupational licensing.
So I could open a clinic that's Econoboy's heart transplant, or Emporium, and I could perform a heart transplant.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know about that, Micah. That seems a little bit, bit too far for my taste.
Do I think this is ideal? No, but like, remember, we have one thing we could change. Okay, we're just striking this, and all occupational licensing is gone. I'll take it. I will absolutely take it.
I might be willing to take it as well, even with the concerns about stuff like doctors. Like, if you imagine a world where the FDA was super aggressive in cracking down on like false advertising, which is already an enormous problem in the world where we do have occupational licensing, then
we might be headed to the Wild West in terms of securities. I think the Supreme Court's currently hearing the case of whether or not the federal government has the right to regulate, whether or not the SEC can exist is like a question that's being potentially answered.
Kato might be
Micah.
celebrating right now.
Jesus. All right, well, there we go. We've got our 3 economic regulations. I say get rid of the corporate tax because I'm a corporate shill, I guess. SDL, I don't even remember SDL. What was your
solidarity strikes?
Solidarity strikes. Micah says no occupational licensing allowed in his ideal worldview, for various reasons, I suppose. So next up, I call this non-economic rule and regulation. Now, to be fair, I'm sure there's an economic impact to like literally anything the government does. So obviously, this is a kind of an ordinary understanding of what we mean by economic regulation. What would we get rid of? What would we keep? I think SDL started last time. I guess I'll start this time. So again, to defend myself, I will open up my my link here. So
Damn. He gets to pull stuff up.
I get to pull stuff up, So here's my one statute that I would get rid of. It is the penalty, 21 U.S. Code 44, I suppose. Penalty for simple possession. So this is essentially the statute that officially makes it to where you can be sort of criminally held liable, I suppose you could say, for possessing certain small amounts of drugs, right? So some sort of recreational amount, let's say. This is the statute that I would get rid of in its entirety. I do not think fundamentally people should go to jail just for possessing drugs. Now, if you are found to be selling drugs, that's a different question. I mean, if you're selling people heroin and we feel like heroin is a bad thing to supply to communities, perfectly reasonable. But the idea that the best way to help a heroin addict is to throw him in prison with a bunch of presumably criminals, people who, rapists and murderers and people who robbed stores and stuff or whatnot, and a bunch of other people who did heroin and drugs. And so this does not seem to me to be the best way to help people struggling with addiction to put them in prison. And certainly for certain drugs, I mean, the idea that you can go to prison for eating an edible or smoking a joint in many parts of this country that just really seems absurd if you ask me. So get rid of that. I think that's the biggest impact. There's such a high percentage of our prison population people who go to jail just for having drugs on them, and that just seems pretty wrong to me. So and it would lead to a big impact, big cost savings. A lot of jails we need not fill anymore, which is probably a good thing. So that's my worst non-economic regulation. SDL calls me a thief. He said apparently this was his first idea in the group chat, but I got to it first. SDL, you had to pick something else.
Yeah, I mean, I know we discussed this a little bit before. I am totally in favor of maybe total decriminalization of use and possession. I know the only concern that I have for stuff like decriminalization or even legalization is that in the United States, we do not have single-payer healthcare. We don't even have universal healthcare. And so that results in people who need treatment for drug use not being able to get it. And so one problem that can occur is people who are very poor, not being becoming addicted, not being able to get off of it. Now, the solution to that is not to give them free housing in a jail. I think there are other policy solutions here. But I did want to mention that one of the things that people talk about when they point to Portugal as a model is that Portugal actually has mandatory rehabilitation for people who are considered to be problem users. So if they find you on the street using a drug, because you're basically allowed to do it in your house, but if they find you in public, which is probably a sign that you're having trouble using it responsibly, then they'll drag you in front of a 3-man arbitration board. And if those people vote that you have to go to rehabilitation, then you got to go to rehabilitation. So it's not legal to use it. There's still civil penalties, but it's treated much more as a public health issue, sort of like mandatory. I'm totally forgetting the word for it, but if you have a mental health issue and the state takes you, then it's more akin to that.
And notably, that's not prison.
Yes.
So, big difference between the two. Being surrounded by other people struggling with addiction is a lot different than being put in a jail cell with some random criminal of society. So probably far different in terms of outcomes. I mean, I've heard stories of people who, I went to prison and that's when I got clean. I mean, of course, if you just throw someone in a box and don't allow them to use heroin, I mean, I'm sure that leads to, presumably eventually them getting off of heroin or not using it. But is that the most sustainable long-term path to being free from addiction? I mean, probably not, right? And not to mention all the violence and, even if we had a perfect prison system, I still wouldn't support it. But our current prison system, especially funneling drug users into the, third world human rights violating level prisons that we have in the U.S., certainly is not a good thing to do. Micah, what is your worst non-economic related regulation that you would get rid of?
Yeah, so this one's so good that I feel like it's cheating. I would reinstate Roe v. Wade. That's another Supreme Court case by striking Dobbs. Absolutely catastrophic decision, right? That took away reproductive rights from over 100 million women in this country. So it seems pretty open shut to me, right? I don't think I need to make the case on this podcast why women should have the right to choose, why forcing people to that, like, you know, why forcing a woman who is pregnant unwillingly to carry a child to birth is a bad decision for society and for her. So yeah, that'd be my choice.
Yeah,
yeah, fair enough.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's hard to weigh, you know, consequentially. Oh, is it a bigger deal to decriminalize drugs or, you know, reinstitute, you know, reproductive rights in a Roe v. Wade framework? Hard to say, but I mean, obviously, yeah, recency bias, whatever might explain it, bringing back Roe v. Wade, probably a good idea.
I think we'd have to look how many people are in prison for drugs, right? Like how many people would be cured if we decriminalize? Obviously, it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Look, in an ideal world, just simply do both. There you go. All right.
Well, and so I thought that Supreme Court decisions were off the table because I didn't come to y'all's cabal before the show. So I probably would have picked Citizens United just because money is not, in fact, equivalent to speech, and there should be limits on how much money you put in. But the one that I picked was I was interested in just eliminating whatever caps there are on visas. So this isn't quite one line, but like we have a whole bunch of numerical limits on how many people can get into the country as a refugee, how many can get in on a work visa, how many can get in as family, and that's ridiculous. Just uncap those, and you eliminate like 90% of the problems with the U.S.
Which one would you uncap? Because you can only uncap one.
I feel surely I could, if I comb through, I could find one Supreme Court case that legalized like caps in particular or something. I don't know. If I had to pick one, it like probably the either the refugee or the work visa cap. I'm not sure which one would have better positive impacts for the world, but
yeah, I mean, uncapping employment-based would be probably the most popular. Uncapping family-based actually could generate the most outcome. We already have like the most family-based immigration, but like if you completely uncap it, including specifically for like your brothers, sisters, and I think it's like adult children, right? Like you just get like crazy amounts of like migration that's generated from that. The policy of maximizing immigration through supporting chain migration.
Basically, yeah.
There you go. Well, we've got, and those are some good, you know, general regulations to think about. I think a lot of people, a lot of the times when people think about the things that they would add or take away, it's often very overarching things, right? Like, oh, we need to have comprehensive immigration reform to have a huge impact on the issue. But, you know, the reality is there's pretty much with every policy, there's definitely some min-maxing that you can do to really effectively, you know, perhaps like compromise what's politically feasible with what is most efficacious, right? Where you can make some big change with only small changes in the codes that we follow.
I'm sorry, there's just something so funny about min-maxing policy change. It sounds like we're going to get like an Econoboy effective immigration system speed run any %, 3 years. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, literally, like it just seems like, okay, for instance, like if, like take the PRO Act, for instance. The PRO Act is good. The PRO Act would be a really great step towards, as a whole, like, you know, creating a better union environment and a, you know, more sort of a more fair environment, let's say, for unionization. I don't know, but if for some reason, like if you had to, like, for some reason you couldn't get the whole thing passed, you had to rework it to get more broader support within the Democratic caucus or a bipartisan bill, you know, SDL might say, hey, the most important thing, like the deal breaker, we got to have secondary strikes. And having in your heads, when you're thinking about policy, having in your heads, like, what are the true prioritizations that I would make if I was actually faced with that constraint, with some political constraint, with some communal constraint, whatever it might be. I mean, that's a good thing to have in mind, because a lot of people are of the view that, unfortunately, they can be of a very frustrating view, which is like, if I can't have everything I want, I might as well just whine and piss and shit myself and do nothing, right? Which is kind of a frustrating, you know, fairly frustrating kind of type of argument to deal with. I will say,
for what it's worth, though that opinion is like very common on places like Twitter, it just doesn't seem to be very common in real life. Like,
in real politics, of course, yeah.
Yeah, like just, you know, I know the stat people like to point to is Sometimes people will blame, like, I don't know, say Bernie voters for losing the 2016 election, but it was like something like 95% of people who voted for Bernie Sanders, like they swallowed their pride and they voted for Hillary Clinton. And we see that over and over again. Like people in Democratic primaries and Republican primaries, they swallow their pride, even though they were arguing that Trump is like the incarnation of Satan. Nope. Well, they're voting for him because they hate abortion. Like I don't know. People are actually very pragmatic most of the time.
I was listening to a clip of Lindsey Graham in 2016 when he was running for president, and he was in a car and he was just talking about how great Joe Biden is. That was basically the clip. He was talking about, he's like, Joe Biden is, he was literally crying. Like he was emotional talking about how great Joe Biden was. And he was saying, you know, Joe Biden is the nicest person I've ever met in politics. If you cannot like Joe Biden, you've got something wrong with you. And then he ends it off by saying, this is a direct quote from Lindsey Graham. He goes, Joe Biden is as good a man as God ever created. like 8 years later, he's like, impeach him. He's the worst. He's leading to moral decay. It's like, oh my God, this guy obviously he's making some political prioritizations. He's trying to
impeach Jesus Christ.
He's trying to impeach as good a man as God ever created. Can you believe it? But that is, you know, of course, to SEL's point of obviously, you know, for all the, you know, I don't know, for all the haranguing that certain Republicans will give Donald Trump, I mean, they're going to be voting for him, right? Overwhelmingly so in November. Because people do make these practical decisions when it comes to politics. And so, you know, similarly, I think that part of our list shows that there could be arguably a very progressive case for eliminating the corporate tax, especially in a world where you can replace it with something better. And some ideas which at first seem small can have very positive effects. And obviously, like the corporate tax itself, right? It's a very small policy that has a very negative effect, right? So you can implement something that initially seems like it's not really that big of a deal, you know, but it creates so many downstream effects that you just never could have possibly thought would happen. So it's important to be mindful, I guess, on the origination side of policies, much like saying you should be in education for your entire life, despite what you might want, like certain people believe. Unbelievable. Can you imagine?
Just think of all the downstream effects, right? The overproduction of poets would be insane. So many pretentious people with 16, 17 BAs. It would be horrible.
Exactly. So a little too much IQ, if you ask me, in society. Too many IQ
like I said,
points.
Their brains would grow too large, right?
Exactly. We'd have to change, you know, helmet size. The inflation of helmet sizes would be a real economic problem in our society. But that's all I've got. Any last words from you guys?
I like big changes, but small changes are good too.
There we go.
Yeah, no, it was a good episode. Apparently, as our results showed, we're all pretty left wing and like definitely left of center. And yeah, I mean, screw occupational licensing. Let everybody be a doctor. Okay, think about the educational process is 8 years plus residency. How about 0 years? Plus
0 years to become a doctor.
I'm really glad that this podcast finally proves something that I've been saying to Micah for years, that he's a social democrat. Oh my God. And he's on a libertarian socialist podcast. The Boy about to start quoting Kropotkin. Oh my God.
This is apparently a libertarian socialist podcast. That's true. You know, that's the true spectrum isn't neoliberal to socialist. It's simply just socialist, it turns out.
It's socialist to socialist to kind of socialist.
Well, the libertarians were right. You know, the one drop rule. If you're even slightly socialist, you pretty much entirely are socialist. So there you go. Well, anyway, guys, I guess to close it out for the audience, you know, thanks for tuning into another episode, guys. We always appreciate you guys coming in and donating and, you know, being a part of this very wonky niche podcast. You know, it's fun to get a few hundred views on super dense policy discussion based videos. You know, it's pretty crazy. So thanks to Copy, Elias Jackson, and Friedrich specifically for supporting the show on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/3wonks. Become a member today for $3 and support this very policy dense show in a tough landscape for policy dense shows. And thanks again for everyone watching. And be sure to tune in a couple weeks where we talk about another couple of topics. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.